Chapter 2366. His sword intent had broken through. Zhou Bai looked at Zhou Xian with a complicated gaze and a trace of fear. Although his sword intent was only at the primordial god realm, its might made her heart palpitate. Zhou Xian looked at the depths of the starry sky with a complicated gaze. Kindness. The stronger a person was, the more benevolent he was, the more he could change the fate of countless living beings. Conversely, if a person was powerful enough to do as he pleased, then it would be a disaster for all living beings. But just now his kindness had allowed his sword intent to break through once more. Even if no one thanked him for his kindness, please don't lose what's most precious to you. Because one day you might be able to obtain good karma. Zhou Xian retracted his thoughts and looked at Zhou Bai. Miss Zhou Bai, you're a sensible person with great wisdom. Why doesn't the clan allow you to be the patriarch? Zhou Bai shook her head. I'm a woman. If I were to become the patriarch, they're afraid that the clan would become someone else's dowry. Zhou Xian smiled. So you're giving up? Zhou Bai looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian smiled. It's very simple if you want to mediate the enmity between me and the clan. You have to be the patriarch. Otherwise it's useless. They'll still come looking for trouble with me and I'll still kill them. In this way the conflict between me and the clan will only grow. Zhou Bai fell silent. Zhou Xian smiled and said, You have feelings for the clan, but you should understand that among the younger generation of the clan, no one is more outstanding than you. As the clan leader you have the power to protect the clan better. Zhou Bai fell silent for a moment before she said, I understand. The corners of Zhou Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Actually, if Zhou Bai really became the patriarch, then it might not be a bad thing for him. After all, it was always better to have a friend than an enemy at any time. Zhou Bai looked at Zhou Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, I'm going to the Paradise Realm. Are you willing to come with me? Zhou Xian was curious. Immortal Realm? Zhou Bai nodded. It's an extremely mysterious place. That place is currently the most dangerous place that we know of. 2 universe-enlightened ancestral god realm experts of my sect have entered that place in the past, but they've never returned. Zhou Xian smiled and said, Don't tell me you're trying to lead me there and divert the trouble to someone else? Zhou Bai shook his head. I won't harm you. Zhou Xian was curious. Why? Zhou Bai looked at Zhou Xian. Because I can't kill you. Even if the entire clan mobilized all their forces, they would not be able to kill young Master Yi. Right? Zhou Xian looked straight at Zhou Bai. Is it because I have a Dedeabi? Zhou Bai smiled. No. Zhou Xian was curious. Then why? Zhou Bai smiled lightly. Because young Master Yi speaks of Dedeabi very casually. So casually that you don't think Dedeabi is extraordinary. Zhou Xian fell silent. Zhou Bai smiled. Young Master Yi, let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she flicked her sleeve. Bang. The space in front of her suddenly split apart, and a space-time tunnel appeared before them. Zhou Xian said, If I go with you to the Paradise Realm, can you guarantee that the clan won't go to the universe of gods to look for trouble with my academy? Zhou Bai nodded. Zhou Xian looked at Zhou Bai in silence. Zhou Bai chuckled. Although I'm not the patriarch, I'm the protector of the sect. My authority is only second to the patriarch's. Telling them not to cause trouble for you is something I can do. Zhou Xian asked, What if they come? Zhou Bai said, I'll help you kill them. Zhou Xian looked at Zhou Bai. A moment later he smiled. Let's go. With that said, the two disappeared into the spacetime tunnel. Inside the hall, the 7th young master stood respectfully. On both sides were the various elders of the clan. The patriarch, Zhou Xian, suddenly said, She took Zhou Xian away? The 7th young master nodded. Zhou Xian frowned. Why did she take Zhou Xian away? The 7th young master shook his head. I don't know. Zhou Xian fell silent. At this moment an elder suddenly said, No matter what, that Zhou Xian must die. Zhou Xian glanced at the elder. Then you go kill him? The elder's expression froze. Although Zhou Bai was a member of the younger generation, her status in the clan was second only to the patriarch. Be it status or strength. Zhou Bai had reached the peak of the half-step ancestor god realm a long time ago. The most terrifying thing was that she could already fight ancestor god realm experts at that time. Zhou Xian suddenly said, Send someone to keep an eye on them. Report immediately if anything happens. With that he stood up and left. In the hall, the crowd dispersed. In the space-time tunnel, Yi Xian and Zhong Bai were shuttling swiftly. Yi Xian suddenly looked at the ancient book in Zhong Bai's hand. "Miss Zhong Bai, what book is this?" Zhong Bai smiled. "It's a book about realms written by Miss Qin." Yi Xian smiled. "According to what I know, you want to swallow the immortal treasure pavilion, right?" Zhong Bai fell silent. Yi Xian asked softly, "Do you know Qin Guan?" Zhong Bai shook her head. "Not much." Yi Xian shook his head. "You dare to target the immortal treasure pavilion when you don't know much? Miss Zhong Bai, let me tell you, they can't contact Miss Qin Guan now. Once they do, I'm afraid your clan will be consigned to eternal damnation." Zhong Bai turned to look at Yi Xian. "Is young Master Yi familiar with Pavilion Master Qin?" Yi Xian nodded. "He's my friend." Zhong Bai looked into the distance and said softly, "When the clan wanted to target the immortal treasure pavilion, I suggested it, but they didn't accept it. The breadth of this Pavilion Master Qin's knowledge is rarely seen." Yi Xian smiled. "Not only is she knowledgeable, but she's also very strong. Miss Zhong Bai, to be honest, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult for you to save your clan, especially when your clan attacked the immortal treasure pavilion. I know Miss Qin Guan's temper, she won't let your clan off." Zhong Bai glanced at Yi Xian and hesitated to speak. Yi Xian smiled. "Don't look at me. Miss Qin Guan is very good at forging swords. I can't deal with her." Plus, at this point he suddenly stopped talking. Zhong Bai quickly asked, "Unless what?" Yi Xian shook his head. "Miss Zhong Bai, you've overlooked a problem. Right now, you're the only one in the clan who wants to change the clan and form good karma. As for the others, they're all on the brink of death. If you want to change the clan, you can only become the patriarch. Only then can you change the clan and save it. Otherwise, whatever you do now is meaningless because you're not the patriarch. Understand?" Zhong Bai nodded. "Understood. This time, I'm going to the immortal domain to find a senior of my clan. I need his support. With his support, I can become the patriarch without bloodshed." Yi Xian nodded. "Speaking of which, what kind of place is this immortal domain?" Zhong Bai shook her head. "I don't know." Yi Xian smiled. "Then aren't you afraid of not coming back?" Zhong Bai replied. "Afraid?" Yi Xian was surprised. "Then, you're still going?" Zhong Bai glanced at Yi Xian. "Because I'm afraid, that's why I'm bringing you." Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Zhong Bai said seriously, "I think if you come with me, we should be able to come back alive, right?" Yi Xian said solemnly. "What makes you think so?" Zhong Bai looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, "I think no one can kill you, at least in this universe." Yi Xian was curious. "Why are you so confident in me? Is it because of your guesses just now?" Zhong Bai countered with a question. "Can anyone kill you?" Yi Xian thought about it and said, "Yes, but they're all my people." "Did they be?" Zhong Bai looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm not lying." Zhong Bai nodded. "I believe you." Yi Xian was slightly stunned. "You really believe me?" Zhong Bai nodded. "Of course. You have no reason to lie to me, right?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. How rare. This was the first time someone believed him when he spoke the truth. Zhong Bai's eyes flashed with worry. With the clan's current strength, there were indeed very few opponents. But now, the clan was courting death by provoking two people who weren't afraid of the clan. AI. Zhong Bai sighed softly. Just as Yi Xian said, if she wanted to change the clan and save the clan, she had to become the clan leader. Only by becoming the clan leader would she be able to change everything. At this thought, Zhong Bai looked into the distance and sped up. Yi Xian glanced at Zhong Bai. Why was this clan different from his own? The clan valued males over females, but his own clan valued females over males. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. What a sin. At this moment, Zhong Bai suddenly said, "We're almost there." Yi Xian looked into the distance. At the end of his vision he saw a white vortex. Yi Xian was curious. "Miss Zhong Bai, what kind of place is this paradise?" Zhong Bai shook her head. "It's a very mysterious place. As for what kind of place it is, I don't know either. I only know that my ancestor once entered it and never came out again." As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian. "Are you afraid?" Yi Xian blinked. "Do you know that I have a nickname?" Zhong Bai was curious. "What nickname?" Yi Xian smiled. "Legacy Killer." Zhongbai was speechless. Soon the two of them were getting closer to the white vortex. At this moment Yixian suddenly felt a trace of uneasiness. Sensing this, Yixian frowned slightly. "Brother Bai, is it dangerous inside?" Dedeabi said, "That depends on how you look at it." Yixian was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Dedeabi was silent for a moment. "If you die you definitely won't die but..." Yixian was curious. "But what?" Dedeabi said indifferently. "But you might be beaten badly." Yixian was slightly stunned. Then he smiled. "I won't." Dedeabi said, "Don't be too confident." Yixian looked at the white vortex that was getting closer and closer. He smiled. "If I become a younger brother again and get beaten badly again, I will recognize Xiao Ta as my master." Xiao Ta immediately said, "Really?" Yixian was speechless. Chapter 2367. Hearing Xiao Ta's words, Yixian's face immediately turned cold. "This guy has a rebellious streak. Looks like I have to find a chance to teach this guy a lesson, lest he rebels in the future." At this time Xiao Ta hesitated and then said, "Young lord, I was just joking." Yixian said with a smile, "Xiao Ta, I still don't know what changes have happened to you." Xiao Ta was silent. Yixian was a little curious. "What's wrong?" Xiao Ta sighed softly. "Young lord, I have to keep a low profile. I used to talk too much and then..." At this point it stopped talking. Yixian wanted to say something else, but at this time, a white light suddenly appeared in front of him and Zhongbai. Boom! With a roar in their ears, the two appeared in a stretch of ruins. Yixian scanned the surroundings. At this moment he and Zhongbai were in the center of a wasteland. Everywhere around them were broken fences and broken walls. Above their heads floated a thick black cloud that was incomparably stifling. And in the distant sky, there were still some remnants of swords floating. Swords? Yixian frowned slightly. Could it be that this was once a swordsman's sect? As if he felt something, he suddenly turned his head. In the distance, a few hundred zhang away, there was a stone tablet that was hundreds of zhang long, and on the stone tablet there was a sword. At this time Yixian's eyes fell on the sword. The sword was 4 feet long, 2 fingers wide, and it was completely black. At this time Zhongbai suddenly said, "Be careful." Yixian nodded. He looked at the stone tablet in the distance and said, "Let's go and have a look." Zhongbai nodded. The two walked toward the stone tablet. On the way Yixian glanced around as if he discovered something. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his left thumb lightly pressed against the green profound sword. Zhongbai slowly clenched his right hand. Soon the two walked in front of the stone tablet. Yixian looked at the stone tablet. On the stone tablet there were 3 big words. Demon Sword Sect. Demon Sword Sect. Yixian whispered, "It really is a swordsman's sect." It had been a long time since he had seen the swordsman's sect. Zhongbai said softly, "There must have been a great battle here." Yixian nodded. He looked up at the black sword at the top of the stone tablet. He opened his palm. "Come." The black sword did not move. There was no reaction. Yixian was stunned. In the next moment his right hand lightly twirled. "Come." The black sword still did not budge. The corner of Yixian's mouth twitched. "What the hell?" Zhongbai looked at Yixian without saying a word. Yixian's old face turned slightly red. He suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared he was already in front of the black sword. He sized up the black sword and frowned, because he couldn't see what was so special about it. Yixian held the black sword in his hand. Boom. As soon as he held it, Yixian's pupils shrank. In the next moment his eyes turned pitch black. In an instant, a cloud of black energy erupted from his body. Then his body began to corrode bit by bit. Shocked, Yixian hurriedly activated his armor. Rumble. As soon as the armor appeared, the cloud of black energy was blocked. However, he was shocked to find that the insides of his body were still being corroded. The armor was blocking the outside, not the inside. Yixian hurriedly calmed down and activated his bloodline power. Boom. In an instant, the blood in Yixian's body began to boil. Very soon, a terrifying bloodline power erupted from his body. Along with this bloodline, following the eruption of this bloodline power, the black energy in his body was slowly suppressed. Seeing this, Yixian immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the black sword suddenly trembled violently. A moment later, it struggled free from Yixian's grasp and stabbed towards the center of his forehead. Yi Xian didn't dodge and allowed it to stab into his forehead. Right at the instant that the black sword was about to stab into the center of Yi Xian's forehead, a hand suddenly grabbed the blade of the sword. It was Zhou Bai. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Zhou Bai's eyes. She swiftly grabbed the black sword and tossed it to the side. As soon as the sword left her hand, her right palm split into two. At the instant that the black sword flew out, it suddenly turned around and stabbed towards the center of Zhou Bai's forehead. Zhou Bai's eyes narrowed slightly. She was just about to attack when a ray of light suddenly slashed against the black sword. Bang! An expanse of light erupted, and then both swords were blasted flying. Yi Xian appeared by Zhou Bai's side. Zhou Bai gazed at the black sword with a solemn expression on her face. That sword is terrifying. Yi Xian glanced at Zhou Bai's severed hand and said, "Recuperate first." Zhou Bai nodded slightly. She withdrew a medicinal pill and consumed it. However, it was utterly useless. Moreover, she noticed to her astonishment that her palm was being corroded bit by bit. Zhou Bai frowned at the sight of this. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Zhou Bai's arm, and then a strand of his bloodline energy surged into Zhou Bai's arm. Bang! A ray of blood-red light swept through Zhou Bai's arm, and then the remaining black energy around Zhou Bai's injury vanished. Yi Xian relaxed his grip and spoke softly, "It's fine now." Zhou Bai gazed at Yi Xian with astonishment in her eyes. "Your bloodline energy." In that instant just now, she'd clearly sensed Yi Xian's bloodline energy. It was too terrifying. Yi Xian grinned. "Have you heard of the bloodline of the Mad Demon clan?" Zhou Bai shook her head. Yi Xian smiled and then he gazed towards the distance. At this moment, the green profound sword had entered into battle with the black sword. Yi Xian suddenly noticed that the green profound sword's ability in one-on-one combat was very formidable, and it wasn't just ordinarily formidable. Of course, the black sword was quite terrifying as well. After all, the green profound sword could be said to be the number one sword beneath the three swords, yet this black sword was actually able to fight the green profound sword equally. At this moment, the black sword in the distance suddenly trembled violently. In an instant, thousands of strands of sword chi swept out from within it. Tens of thousands of holes were torn in the sky. The green profound sword suddenly trembled slightly, and then it transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. It broke through the enemy's defenses with a single point. Rumble! A ray of light suddenly exploded in the distant sky, and in the blink of an eye, the two swords were sent flying several tens of thousands of meters away. Wherever the two swords passed, spacetime was torn inch by inch, and the entire sky was directly torn into a huge spider web. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Yi Xian looked at the black sword with a slight frown, and his heart was filled with shock. Just where did this sword come from, and how could it actually block the green profound sword? At this moment, the black sword suddenly trembled violently, and in the next moment the spacetime in front of Yi Xian directly split apart, and then a sword directly stabbed towards the center of Yi Xian's brows. It was the black sword. To catch bandits, first catch the king? Yi Xian was stunned. This sword was very thoughtful and actually knew to catch bandits by first catching the king. Watch out! Zhou Bai's voice suddenly rang out in Yi Xian's ears, and in the next moment, the hilt of the black sword was directly grabbed by a hand. It was Zhou Bai's hand, and at this moment, the black sword had already left Yi Xian's brows. It was less than half an inch away from Yi Xian's brows. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Zhou Bai's eyes. She grabbed the black sword and tossed it towards the side. At the same time, she suddenly charged forward and smashed her fist forward. Rumble! A terrifying fist seal slammed into the black sword, and the black sword was blasted several thousand feet away. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Zhou Bai's eyes. She seemed to have thought of something and she turned around to look at Yi Xian with slight anger. "Why didn't you resist? Could it be that you don't know how dangerous this sword is?" Yi Xian was just about to speak when the black sword suddenly turned around and vanished into the horizon. It fled? Zhou Bai's brows knit together slightly. Yi Xian glanced at the sky and his brows knit together slightly as well. That sword really does possess some ability and its origins are extraordinary. Zhou Bai pointed towards the distance. "Look." Yi Xian looked along the direction of Zhou Bai's finger. A damaged hull was floating at the end of his field of vision, and the black sword was hovering in the air above the hull. Moreover, it was emanating numerous sword howls as if it was provoking them on purpose. Zhou Bai spoke solemnly, "It's provoking us on purpose and wants us to go over." Xian nodded, "Then let's go over." As he spoke, he walked towards the sword. Zhou Bai was slightly stunned and then she hurriedly pulled on Xian's arm. Xian gazed at Zhou Bai and felt slightly helpless. "Didn't you trust me a lot earlier? Why don't you trust me now?" Zhou Bai hesitated for a moment and said, "This place is very dangerous. Even though you're very strong, I think that we should be more cautious. That sword is provoking us on purpose to make us go over, so there's definitely something wrong with it." Xian thought for a moment and said, "I'll be very responsible and tell you that I'm actually quite strong. Really? If it attacks me again, don't interfere. Do you understand?" Zhou Bai. When he saw Zhou Bai's shocked expression, Xian shook his head and smiled. "Let's go. Let's go together." With that, he led Zhou Bai towards the distance. Zhou Bai slowly clenched his right hand, and his eyes were filled with vigilance. Xian turned to look at Zhou Bai. "You think it's very dangerous?" Zhou Bai nodded. Xian thought for a moment and said, "Saying that I'm invincible might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I'm least afraid of a swordsman. The only swordsman that can kill me is either my sister or my father, and the last one is my big brother. So don't worry, understand?" Zhou Bai. Xian didn't pay any more attention to Zhou Bai, and he led Zhou Bai to the front of the dilapidated hall. At this moment, a phantom suddenly surged out from the black sword, and the phantom looked down at Xian and said in a hoarse voice, "Swordsman." Xian looked at the phantom. "What?" The phantom suddenly said in a fierce voice, "I want you dead." Xian frowned slightly. "Can you give me a reason?" The phantom said, "I don't like the sight of you. Is this reason enough?" Xian thought for a moment and then smiled slightly. "There are many who don't like the sight of me. Who do you think you are?" As he said that, he raised a finger and laughed. "Don't say that I'm bullying you. Come, I'll stand still and let you slash me. I won't defend and I won't dodge." The sword suddenly said fiercely, "Are you sure?" Xian said with a smile, "A gentleman keeps his word." The sword suddenly trembled violently and in the next moment, it directly turned into a spear. Then the spear cut through the sky and stabbed straight at Xian. Seeing this scene, Xian's expression froze. "Damn, this sword doesn't play by the rules." P.S. Asking for tickets. Chapter 2368. The spear stabbed forward. Xian was speechless. Did this idiot know that he could absorb swords? He still did not dodge and allowed the spear to stab him between his eyebrows. Boom. A spear gleam suddenly erupted from between his eyebrows. The terrifying force caused Xian's entire body to tremble. However, Xian was completely unscathed. He had forcefully withstood all the force of the spear. Zhou Bai was completely stunned when he saw this. At this moment, the spear suddenly retreated and widened the distance between it and Xian. The spear trembled slightly and returned to its sword form. Xian looked at Black Sword. "That's it." Black Sword suddenly flew into a rage. "How dare you!" Xian suddenly opened his palm and the Xianxia sword appeared in his hand. The next moment he wielded the sword and slashed forward. Boom. In the distance, Black Sword was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, the Xianxia sword stabbed him again. Boom. Black Sword was sent flying again. This time he flew hundreds of thousands of feet away. After Black Sword stopped, he slashed at him again. Boom. A wave of sword gleam exploded and Black Sword was sent flying. At this moment, Xian suddenly opened his palm and the Xianxia sword appeared in his hand. In the distance, Black Sword suddenly roared angrily. "Two against one, what kind of man are you?" "Two against one." Xian was speechless. He glanced at Black Sword. "Let your master come out." Black Sword said fiercely, "My master has fallen. If he hadn't fallen, a swordsman like you would have died in no time." Xian frowned slightly. "Dead." As he said this, he shook his head slightly. "It seems that your master is very weak. He actually died." Black Sword suddenly roared, "What do you know? Do you know how powerful he is?" "You have no idea." Xian said, "He's dead. Whatever you say is useless." Black Sword was speechless. At the side, Zhou Bai could not help but laugh. Xian continued, "A truly powerful swordsman will never die, just like me." Black Sword's entire body trembled. Swordsman, you dare despise my master. Yi Xian nodded. I dare. If you're not convinced, let him resurrect and beat me up. Black Sword said angrily. Are you talking like a human? He had already fallen. Your words are so shameless. Yi Xian laughed and said, I'm shameless, he. Black Sword was speechless. Zhou Bai, little fellow, you're quite interesting. At that moment, a middle-aged man slowly walked out from the floating palace. The black sword flew in front of the middle-aged man. Master. Zhou Bai's expression instantly became extremely solemn when he saw the middle-aged man. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man in silence. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and finally stopped at the Dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist. He chuckled. Dedeabi. Yi Xian nodded. The middle-aged man then looked at the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand. A trace of solemnity and complexity appeared in his eyes when he saw the azure sword. At that moment Zhou Bai suddenly said, You are? The middle-aged man smiled. The sect leader of the demon sword sect. Zhou Bai frowned slightly. I've never heard of you. The middle-aged man smiled. It's normal that you've never heard of me. The demon sword sect has been around for at least 100 million years. Things have remained the same, but people have changed after 100 million years. 100 million years. Yi Xian was quite shocked. There were already such terrifying powerhouses 100 million years ago. This meant that the martial arts civilization of that era was already very advanced. The middle-aged man suddenly looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, Shall we have a spar? Yi Xian nodded. Okay. The middle-aged man smiled. Be careful. As soon as he said that, the space-time in front of Yi Xian suddenly split open. The next moment, before Yi Xian could react, a sword had pierced his chest. Boom. Yi Xian's body trembled violently, and the armor on his body caved in. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically and he retreated thousands of meters. When he stopped, he looked at his chest. The armor on his chest had caved in. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression became solemn. Although this sword didn't break Arya's armor, the power of this sword was enough to damage Arya's armor. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly chuckled. Your armor is so powerful. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. Your sword is also powerful. The middle-aged man smiled. Again, you have to be careful. As soon as he said that, he took a step forward. As soon as the step fell, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank and he blocked with his sword. Rumble. His right arm trembled violently. In the next moment, Yi Xian was horrified because he discovered that a terrifying force had directly penetrated into his body through his armor. Bang! Yi Xian flew thousands of meters away. When he stopped, a trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. There was a trace of seriousness in Yi Xian's eyes. His opponent's sword technique was so strange that it could penetrate his armor. In the distance, the middle-aged man smiled. Again. Yi Xian looked up and smiled. Of course. As soon as he finished speaking, the armor on his body disappeared with a thought. There was no armor. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. Are you sure you want to do this? Without that armor, my sword technique can easily break your body. Yi Xian smiled. Bring it on. As soon as he said that, he opened his palm and the azure sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment, bang! A terrifying sword intent suddenly shot into the sky from his body. The middle-aged man frowned slightly when he saw the sword intent. Your sword intent. In the distance, Yi Xian smiled. Be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. Hiss. A sharp tearing sound suddenly resounded. In the distance, the middle-aged man's expression was calm as he casually stabbed with his sword. Bang! A wave of sword light suddenly exploded in front of them. In the next moment, the middle-aged man retreated a few hundred meters, but he didn't stop and slashed with his sword again. This attack was even faster than the previous one. A trace of astonishment flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes. With a flick of his wrist, he thrust his sword out. The sword was light like a leaf falling slowly in the wind. However, when the sword struck Yi Xian's sword, it suddenly changed. The originally light sword suddenly turned into a violent storm. Bang! In front of the two, a beam of sword light suddenly exploded. The next moment, Yi Xian had already retreated thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, the space-time between his eyebrows suddenly cracked, and then a sword was already half an inch away from his eyebrows. The scene froze. Did I lose? No. Yixian's Qingxian sword had pierced the hilt of the black sword at some point in time, forcefully blocking the black sword. Yixian shook his wrist. Bang! A wave of sword intent surged out and the black sword was instantly shattered. Flying. The middle-aged man opened his palm and the black sword appeared in his hand. At the instant he held the black sword, he retreated a few meters. A wisp of surprise flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes, and he gazed at Yixian. Young man, your sword intent is amazing. Yixian grinned. Senior, you're too kind. The middle-aged man shook his head. I'm not. Your sword intent is extremely amazing and it contains your sword Dao. Your sword Dao's future is limitless. Yixian smiled and said, thank you. The middle-aged man gazed at Yixian while a wisp of praise flashed through his eyes. Little fellow, I'll attack again. If you're able to block it without relying on any external objects, then I'll give you fortune. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and then the black sword in his hand shot into the sky. Yixian looked up into the sky, and the black sword suddenly started trembling violently. The middle-aged man suddenly smiled and said, little fellow, you can do it. As soon as he finished speaking, his pupils suddenly turned black, and then he opened his right hand and swiftly pulled it down. Life obliteration. Bang! A terrifying strand of black sword intent suddenly shot into the sky and entered the black sword. In an instant, a terrifying and evil aura instantly swept through the entire world. Zhou Bai's pupils constricted and she hurriedly retreated explosively. Her eyes were filled with astonishment as she gazed at the black sword. What evil sword intent? Meanwhile, the middle-aged man suddenly started laughing, the most evil in the world. As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his fingers together and pointed at Yixian. Slash. Hiss. The black sword suddenly slashed down from the sky, and it seemed as if it intended to tear the entire universe into pieces. The sword contained the most evil sword intent. Down below, Yixian slowly closed his eyes. He opened his palm and the Qingxian sword trembled violently. At the same time, streams of terrifying mortal sword will gushed out of his body and converged into the Qingxian sword like a river. In the next moment, the Qingxian sword soared into the sky like a torrent of mortal sword will. Kindness. There was kindness amidst the sword intent in the world. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire sky trembled violently. A black and white light from the sword abruptly exploded, instantly engulfing the entire sky. The cyan profound sword and the black sword were locked in a stalemate. The two swords trembled violently and terrifying bursts of power continued to erupt. The world began to turn illusory bit by bit. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man suddenly pressed his right hand down slowly. The black sword trembled violently before a strand of terrifying energy erupted from it, and then the green profound sword was gradually forced back. Yixian gazed silently at the green profound sword that was being forced back. Kindness can't suppress evil? The evil within the sword intent grew stronger and stronger while the light around the green profound sword grew dimmer and dimmer. At this moment, the kindness sword intent was gradually vanishing as well. It was being suppressed. The black sword's imposing aura grew more and more terrifying, and the green profound sword was at an absolute disadvantage. It wasn't that the green profound sword was no match for the black sword, it was because the kindness sword intent was no match for the evil sword intent. Yixian had a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. All the ancient books he'd read said that evil could never defeat good, but was it really like that? Most of the time evil was stronger than good. At this moment, Yixian slowly opened his eyes and looked into the sky. When good can't do anything, then let evil save all living beings. As soon as he finished speaking, boom. Within Yixian's body, the power of his bloodline suddenly shot into the sky. Within this power of his bloodline, there was a strand of terrifying sword intent that had been sealed for a long time. Evil sword intent. At this moment, the power of his bloodline was undergoing a change. Chapter 2369. Good and Evil Sword Intents. He had comprehended this sword intent before, but he had gradually abandoned it. He did not expect that these two sword intents would reappear with the establishment of his human sword principle. That was not right. It should be said that there were good and evil thoughts in the depths of one's heart. As Yixian's evil sword intent and bloodline power soared into the sky, The green profound sword shook violently. In the next moment, when the bloodline power and evil sword intent surged into it, rumble, the black sword was suddenly sent flying tens of thousands of feet away. At the same time, the middle-aged man's evil sword intent dissipated and was replaced by Yi Xian's good sword intent and evil sword intent. At this moment, Yi Xian's evil sword intent began to suppress Yi Xian's good sword intent together with the bloodline power. The good sword intent could not withstand it. Yi Xian frowned. The evil sword intent was much more ferocious than the good sword intent. Was he really a bad person? Yi Xian shifted his mind, and the sword intent of evil thought and sword intent of kindness were completely withdrawn into his body. Boom. After returning to his body, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes and the bloodline power in his body gradually calmed down. After a while, Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at the middle-aged man in the distance. The middle-aged man smiled. Amazing. Young man, you are really amazing. Not only do you have the good sword intent, but you also have the evil sword intent. Moreover, the two sword intents can coexist peacefully. Amazing. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, you are too kind. The middle-aged man shook his head. You are indeed outstanding. If the demon sword sect had a genius like you. Speaking of this, he sighed and looked gloomy. Yi Xian was curious. Senior, did something happen to the demon sword sect? The demon sword sect nodded. Disaster. Saying this, he looked around and said softly, the foundation of countless years was destroyed in one day. Saying this, he looked at Yi Xian. My sword principle consists of two words. Evil and evil. As a swordsman, we should do as we please and follow our hearts. Yi Xian was silent. Do as you please. Follow your heart. A swordsman should be like that. Of course, he had another point of view, which was that no matter if one was a swordsman or any other cultivation, they should have their own bottom line. Of course, at this moment he naturally wouldn't refute him. We'll talk about other things after we get the benefits. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. What do you think? Yi Xian said seriously, of course. The middle-aged man laughed. I knew it. You're a kindred spirit. Otherwise you wouldn't have such a strong evil intent. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and the black sword in his hand suddenly trembled violently. In the next moment, the black sword directly sank into the center of Yi Xian's brows. Boom. In an instant, a terrifying black aura enveloped Yi Xian. In an instant, countless evil intents surged into Yi Xian's mind like a tidal wave. Yi Xian's eyes widened. Gradually his eyes turned pitch black. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. Today I'll pass on all my evil intents to you. As for how much you can absorb, it'll depend on your own luck. Boom. Suddenly, a terrifying black sword intent soared into the sky from Yi Xian's body. The sword intent directly shattered the space-time above his head and swept across the sky. At this moment, Yi Xian activated the power of the bloodline in his body. He had to suppress this horrifying evil thought. He could not let this evil thought wreak havoc. Boom. As Yi Xian's bloodline power appeared, the powerful evil intent was gradually suppressed. A trace of surprise flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes. Your bloodline power is so powerful. Zhou Bai was also somewhat shocked. She had seen Yi Xian's bloodline power before, and it was indeed extraordinarily terrifying. And behind those who possessed this bloodline power, Zhou Bai's expression gradually became solemn. At this moment, the black aura around Yi Xian disappeared. Yi Xian returned to normal, and he had already absorbed the middle-aged man's evil intent. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Many thanks. The middle-aged man praised. Your sword intent is truly invincible. Not only can it contain the sword intent of good intent, but it can also contain the sword intent of evil intent. Amazing. Yi Xian smiled and said, Senior, you're too kind. The middle-aged man roared with laughter as he opened his palm, and the black sword appeared in his grasp. This sword is called the Evil Sword. Today it's the sword of my demon sword sect's founding ancestor. Today I'll pass it down to you. With this sword, you'll be able to bring forth its greatest might when you utilize the evil sword intent in the future. Yi Xian glanced at the black sword in his hand and said, All right. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before he said, Little fellow, I won't hide it from you. Accepting the inheritance of my demon sword sect might cause you to suffer great karma. I'm sure you've noticed that my demon sword sect was destroyed, so. Yi Xian smiled. It's fine. The The middle-aged man smiled. That's good. As he spoke, his figure gradually became ethereal. Zhou Bai suddenly said, Senior, my ancestor entered this place in the past but he never left. May I know where he went? The middle-aged man smiled. He probably went to Fallen City to search for a divine object that fell from the ruins. Zhou Bai's brows knit together slightly. A divine object that fell from the ruins? The middle-aged man nodded and then he pointed to the right. There's a city 1,500 kilometers away from here and it's called Fallen City. It's a ruin and a very formidable power once resided within it. But for some unknown reason the city was suddenly massacred overnight. The people who massacred the city didn't kill them completely, and they just imprisoned their souls within their bodies forever. So that place has become a ghost city now. As he spoke he glanced at Zhou Xian. You possess the goodwill sword intent. If you're able to save the people of that city, then your goodwill sword intent will probably improve by a level or even undergo a qualitative change. Zhou Bai suddenly asked, Is it dangerous? The middle-aged man smiled. Even I don't dare to rashly step foot into that place. As he spoke he glanced at Zhou Xian again. However, you should be fine. Since you're able to possess the legendary Dedeabi, then the karma of that city shouldn't be able to do anything to you. Of course, this depends on whether you're willing to go or not. As he spoke his body gradually became illusory. Seeing that the middle-aged man was about to completely disappear, Zhou Xian couldn't care less about his face anymore. He hurriedly asked, Senior, the treasures of the demon sword sect. The middle-aged man smiled. They're all gone. As he spoke he completely disappeared. Zhou Xian, Zhou Bai suddenly said, Young Master Yi, I think this might be a trap. Zhou Xian chuckled. How could I not know? Why did the other party give him the inheritance so easily? Was it really because of Zhou Xian's talent? It wasn't just that. If he accepted this inheritance, it would mean that he would become a sworn enemy of the powerful force that destroyed this sect. Zhou Bai said in a low voice, Aren't you worried? Zhou Xian was silent for a moment then said, Do you want to hear the truth? Zhou Bai nodded, Of course. Zhou Xian glanced at the green profound sword in his hand, then said, With my sister here, I'm not afraid of any karma between heaven and earth. As he spoke he walked into the distance. Zhou Bai. In the distance within Zhou Xian's body Xiaota suddenly said, Young master, you're a little too arrogant now. Zhou Xian smiled. Am I? Xiaota said, Yes. Zhou Xian laughed. With a sister like this, if I don't be arrogant, who would be arrogant? Xiaota was silent for a moment then said, I can't refute you. Zhou Xian. On the way Zhou Bai suddenly said, Are you going to Fallen City? Zhou Xian nodded. Zhou Bai turned to look at Zhou Xian. Which city do you want to save? Zhou Xian said softly, Let's go take a look first. Zhou Bai nodded. As if thinking of something, Zhou Xian opened his palm, and the evil sword appeared in his hand. He sized up the evil sword then smiled, Why are you so quiet? After a moment of silence the evil sword spirit said, Master asked me to follow you, so you're my master from now on. Since I'm my master I should be loyal to you. How would I dare to disrespect you? After all, I can't defeat you. Zhou Xian was slightly stunned and then he laughed. What an evil spirit. You have a bright future. Huh. Zhou Bai glanced at Zhou Xian, but he didn't say anything. Before long the two of them arrived at Fallen City. The entire city was extremely gloomy, and there were two bloody corpses hanging upside down at the city gates, still dripping with blood. Blood could be seen everywhere around the city walls. Zhou Xian frowned when he saw this scene. Zhou Bai's expression suddenly became solemn. This place is so strange. Zhou Xian nodded. Right at this moment, gloomy laughter suddenly resounded from the side. Zhou Xian turned around and saw a pale woman sitting on the nearby city walls. The woman sat on top of the city walls and her legs were swaying about. At this moment the woman was looking at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian withdrew his gaze. Let's enter the city. Zhou Bai hesitated for a moment, but he still followed Zhou Xian. Right at this moment the woman on the city walls suddenly said, How dare you? Zhou Xian stopped, and then he looked at the woman on the city walls and smiled. Miss, what's your name? The woman stared at Zhou Xian. Do you know that you'll become food for countless evil spirits once you enter this city? Your body and blood will make those evil spirits go mad. Zhou Xian asked again, Miss, what's your name? The woman gazed at Yi Xian for a short while before she said, Su Xiao Xiao. Yi Xian spread out his palm. Do you want to be free? If you do, come follow me. Su Xiao Xiao looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian said again, come. Su Xiao Xiao suddenly stretched out her hand and lightly tapped in front of her. Soon an invisible barrier blocked her hand. Then she looked at Yi Xian. You can only enter this city, you can't leave. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and Dedeabi flew out. The next moment, Dedeabi directly pointed in front of Su Xiao Xiao. Boom. The space in front of Su Xiao Xiao directly distorted. Yi Xian said, hold this brush. Su Xiao Xiao was silent for a moment and then directly reached out to hold Dedeabi. Boom. In an instant, Dedeabi directly brought Su Xiao Xiao out. After coming out, Su Xiao Xiao was dumbfounded. After a while, she turned her head to look at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, I really came out? Yi Xian nodded and then walked towards the distant city gate. Su Xiao 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 Dao said, it's really dangerous. Yi Xian waved the Dedeabi in his hand and said disdainfully, Dedeabi is my big brother. Who dares to touch me? Who dares? Su Xiao Xiao. In a room somewhere in the Milky Way, an angry voice suddenly sounded, F***ck, what the F***ck, don't you dare mess around. P.S. Asking for votes. If you don't know how to vote, you can come to Zhongheng Chinese Network. You can vote here. Chapter 2370. Yi Xian ignored Dedeabi and led Zhong Bai away. Dedeabi hurriedly said, Yi Xian, don't act recklessly. Don't act recklessly. Yi Xian stopped and said, Brother Bai, are you that afraid of Fallen City? Dedeabi said, I'm not afraid, but I can't interfere with the fate of all living beings. This goes against the rules that Master set for me. What you want to do, that's your own business. You can't make me take the blame. Yi Xian. Brother Yi, you have to be a man. Yi Xian was curious. Why can't you interfere with the fate of all living beings? Dedeabi said, because I'm the operator of fate, the executor of the rules. If I interfere, wouldn't it be a mess? Yi Xian asked again, didn't you kill people before? Dedeabi said, they provoked me first. Since they provoked me, it's natural for me to kill them. There's a cause and effect. Yi Xian thought about it and said, that's easy. After I go in, I'll lie low for a while and let them take the initiative to cause trouble for me. Finally, I'll bring you out. Some idiots will definitely deliberately target me and you. At that time, it'll be natural for you to kill them. But Dedeabi hurriedly said, Yi Xian, don't be like that. You're luring them, it's not right. Yi Xian smiled. Brother Bai, don't feel pressured. We're here to do something good. Even if you violate the rules, your master definitely won't blame you. Dedeabi sighed. Yi Xian, you have to understand that existence is reasonable. In the forest, you beat back the wolf to save the sheep, but what about the wolf? What if it starves to death? Yi Xian pointed to the city in the distance. Do you feel the hostility and resentment in this city? How many died tragically? Dedeabi said, they have their own destiny. Yi Xian smiled and said, are some living beings destined to be tragic from birth? Dedeabi replied, not completely, they can work hard to change the trajectory of their fate. Yi Xian chuckled. Brother Bai, let me ask you, if I asked Qing'er to kill you now, would you feel wronged? After a moment of silence, Dedeabi said, don't be like this. Aren't we having a good chat? Yi Xian smiled and said, if I let Qing'er kill you now, your death will be your fate. You can't blame Qing'er for your death. You can only blame yourself for not working hard enough, right? Dedeabi, Yi Xian whispered, Brother Bai, I'm not arguing with you, I just want to tell you that the people at the bottom are often helpless. Dedeabi was silent for a moment, then said, I know what you're saying, but I really can't break the rules. If the people who enforce the rules break the rules, the world will fall into chaos. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, how about this, if you don't want to get involved, we'll change the method. I'll do it, after I do it, you cover me. In this way, other people's karma will become our karma. What do you think? Dedeabi said in a low voice, I don't think so. Is there a difference? Yi Xian said seriously, of course there is a difference. You cover me, that means you don't have to get involved with other karma. Dedeabi was silent. Yi Xian said, then it's settled. Dedeabi said in a low voice, do I have a choice? Yi Xian nodded. Of course, I'm a person who respects democracy very much. I, Yi Xian, am not the kind of person who calls others for help. Dedeabi, Yi Xian said seriously, tell me your choice. Dedeabi was silent for a moment, then said, do as you please. Anyway, I can't do anything to you. Yi Xian laughed and he walked towards the city. At this time Su Xiaoxiao suddenly said behind him, are you really going in? Yi Xian turned to look at Su Xiaoxiao, are you familiar with the city? Su Xiaoxiao nodded, familiar. Yi Xian smiled and said, are you willing to go in with me? Su Xiaoxiao hesitated. Yi Xian smiled and said, if you don't want to, it doesn't matter. You're free now, you can leave. After saying that, he turned and left. Su Xiaoxiao suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian, I'll go in with you. Yi Xian smiled and said, okay. After the three of them entered the city, Yi Xian immediately frowned. This place was too gloomy. Moreover, the surroundings were filled with hostility and resentment. There were too many vengeful spirits. Su Xiaoxiao said in a low voice, in this city there are two extremely powerful ghost kings. They are Yi Xian Ghost King in the south and Sima Ghost King in the north. These two people have been fighting all year round, but they are evenly matched. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly swept over from afar. Seeing this scene, Su Xiaoxiao's expression suddenly changed. She stood directly behind Yi Xian, and then gently poked Yi Xian's waist with the finger of her right hand. You go. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of Yi Xian's group of three. The middle-aged man's face was as pale as a piece of paper, and his eyes were faintly bloodshot. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian with undisguised greed in his eyes. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he opened his palm. A strand of bloodline energy surged out from his palm. As this strand of bloodline energy appeared, the middle-aged man's pupils suddenly constricted. Good blood. Yi Xian said with a smile, do you really want to devour it? The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian, and a wisp of vigilance flashed in his eyes. Are you trying to trick me? Yi Xian's expression froze. Holy shit. Are the people in this place so intelligent? The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian. You came in from the outside. Yi Xian nodded. The middle-aged man asked again, so, you know where this place is? Yi Xian nodded. The middle-aged man sneered, young man, you dared to come in here on your own at such a young age, and you even dared to deliberately expose your special bloodline aura. Are you trying to dig a hole for me to jump into? Yi Xian, the middle-aged man sneered again, you're evil. With that he turned and disappeared at the end of the street in the distance. Yi Xian was a little confused where he stood. What the hell? Zhou Bai said in a low voice, they should have sensed that you're in danger. Su Xiaoxiao also said, it's normal. Those who can survive here are either very strong or very smart. Otherwise they wouldn't have survived until now. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, let's go. With that he led the two women into the distance. Along the way the surroundings were extremely gloomy, but Yi Xian didn't dislike this kind of gloominess. After all, he had the evil thought sword intent. Along the way Yi Xian sensed many powerful auras, but not a single person came to cause trouble for him. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he activated the bloodline power in his body once more. Bang! In a split second, a terrifying bloodline surged out of Yi Xian's body and soared into the sky. Then an extremely powerful bloodline aura permeated the city. The entire fallen city was shocked. Su Xiaoxiao glanced at Yi Xian and then she couldn't help but ask, Big sister, what's he trying to do? Zhou Bai glanced at Yi Xian and then he shook his head, I don't know. At this moment Xiao Tao's voice suddenly resounded. He's trying to act cool. The two women were speechless. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. At this moment, the aura of his bloodline had swept through the entire fallen city. At this moment the space in front of Yi Xian's group of three suddenly trembled, and in the next moment, a middle-aged man in a black robe walked out. This middle-aged man had a square face, thick eyebrows and big eyes. At first glance he looked very rough. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian, and then his gaze fell on the dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist. When he saw dedeabi, a trace of shock and surprise flashed in the middle-aged man's eyes. Behind Yi Xian, Su Xiaoxiao said in a low voice, This is First Ghost King. First Ghost King. Yi Xian looked at First Ghost King, and at this moment, First Ghost King suddenly cupped his fists. Young master, how should I address you? Yi Xian was speechless. Why didn't he hit me? Since he was so polite, it wasn't good for me to act recklessly. First Ghost King said again, young master? Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts, looked at First Ghost King and said with a smile, Yi Xian. First Ghost King glanced at Dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist and smiled slightly. Dedeabi? Yi Xian nodded. Hearing this, First Ghost King's expression suddenly became a little solemn. Young Master Yi, why are you here? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then went straight to the point. I want to save everyone and let everyone out. Hearing this, he was stunned at first and then his expression became strange. Yi Xian smiled and said, what's wrong? First Ghost King smiled bitterly. Young Master Yi, do you know who trapped us? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. First Ghost King sighed softly with a complicated expression. Yi Xian smiled and said, you can tell me. After a moment of silence, First Ghost King said, young Master Yi, you have Dedeabi in your hand, so you are definitely not an ordinary person. However, the strength of the one who trapped us is indescribably strong. Saying that, he shook his head slightly. We are already in despair. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, are you innocent or? First Ghost King immediately said, we are naturally innocent and we are extremely innocent. That person did not want to imprison us, but because he wanted to imprison one person in this city, he imprisoned us together. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Imprison one person? First Ghost King nodded. Imprison one person and then our city will suffer. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, how overbearing. First Ghost King glanced at Yi Xian and then said, young Master Yi, you are not an ordinary person, but I do not recommend you to intervene in this matter. That person is really strong. And now you... At this point he did not continue. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then looked at Dedeabi on his waist. Pen bro, you should know the background of the other party. Tell me, can I beat him? After a moment of silence, Dedeabi said, do you know that this is equivalent to cheating? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, are you willing to say it? Dedeabi said in a deep voice, this is against the rules. Yi Xian's expression was calm. If I am beaten to a pulp, my sister will definitely find trouble with you. Faster thief. Dedeabi could not help but angrily said, can you not do this to me? I am just AF * King Pen. Yi Xian. Chapter 2371. Pen. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Pen bro, do you see this city? If we save this city, then it'll be a great merit to us. In any case, he was going to drag Dedeabi down with him. Dedeabi sighed softly. Yi Xian, I've told you many times. All things have their own rules and we shouldn't interfere forcefully. If you want to interfere, then that's your business. But I can't. Because I'm the executor of the rules. If I interfere, then the entire world will be in chaos. Yi Xian went silent for a moment and then he said, are you sure you don't want to interfere? Dedeabi hesitated for a moment and then he said, what do you want to do? Towards this Yi Xian, it was really a pain in the ass. He couldn't hit him, couldn't scold him, and this fellow just happened to like to cause trouble. It was really a headache. Yi Xian smiled and just when he was about to speak, Xiaota suddenly said, young master, why are you looking for this lousy pen? This lousy pen is useless, just let big sister Tianming kill it. Dedeabi said in a low voice, lousy ta, don't cause trouble. Xiaota laughed coldly. Lousy ta, you still don't understand a problem, and that is, does the young master really need your help? Isn't the young master's father more amazing than you? Isn't the young master's sister more amazing than you? Isn't the young master's big brother more amazing than you? They're all more amazing than you, but the young master still looks for you. Do you know why? Dedeabi went silent for a moment and then he said, why? Xiaota said indifferently, I don't know either. But Dedeabi said angrily, are you poisonous? Xiaota sighed softly. No wonder you were beaten up by big sister Tianming. Let me ask you, are you really only willing to be a pen for your entire life? Don't you have any dreams? Dedeabi said indifferently, what dreams? Xiaota said, follow little master and you will be invincible in the world. Dedeabi said, my master is very powerful. Xiaota asked, is she as strong as sister Tianming? Dedeabi, Xiaota said, young master, don't look for this. Let's do our own thing. You and I will work together. Half of this world belongs to the three swords and the other half to us. Yi Xian's face darkened. At this moment the person beside him hesitated for a moment and said, "Young Master Yi?" Yi Xian collected his thoughts and said with a smile, "Can you take me to see the prisoner?" He also nodded. "Sure. Young Master Yi, come with me." With that he turned around and left. Yi Xian and the other two followed and walked into the distance. Along the way Yi Xian saw many people with pale faces. These people were very strange. If you said they were dead, then their souls and bodies were still there. However, if you said they were not dead, then they looked very abnormal. Soon Yi Xian frowned because he found that these people's lifespans were extremely short. Moreover, there was a mysterious power in their bodies that was constantly eroding their lifespans and souls. At this time Yi Xian suddenly said, "A curse technique, an extremely vicious curse technique. Not only did that person imprison us, but he also cast an extremely vicious curse technique on us. Every month our bodies and souls would suffer a backlash from a mysterious power. This power's backlash." At this point he shook his head slightly and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." With that he stopped in his tracks. Yi Xian turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked in front of him, opened his palm and lightly pressed it against Yi Xian's chest. In the next moment Yi Xian's body trembled violently, and a terrifying power suddenly surged out from his body. Boom! Li Xian's eyes narrowed. He opened his right hand and a terrifying bloodline power surged out from his palm. At the same time there was also the chaotic black flame. As soon as that power appeared, it was enveloped by his bloodline power and the primal chaos black flames. Rumble. Suddenly his body began to tremble violently, and a terrifying power surged out from his body. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes as the bloodline power in his body surged. At this moment he suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. His facial features twisted. Yi Xian's eyes flashed with a hint of hostility. "Suppress." As soon as he finished speaking he pressed his right hand forward and a terrifying bloodline power swept out. At this moment, a terrifying force suddenly erupted from Yi Xian's body. Rumble. As an explosion resounded, Yi Xian retreated hundreds of meters, and the mysterious force instantly surged back into Yi Xian's body. Then Yi Xian's body went limp and he knelt on the ground. He was sweating profusely and his body trembled violently. In the distance Yi Xian's expression was extremely solemn. He glanced at his right hand and saw that it had completely cracked. He hadn't activated Ya's armor just now. Yi Xian looked at Yi Xian in the distance. He hadn't expected that his bloodline power and the chaotic black flame wouldn't be able to destroy the curse in Yi Xian's body. How terrifying! At this moment Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Young Master Yi, it's useless." Yi Xian appeared in front of Yi Xian and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." Yi Xian shook his head slightly. "Perhaps this is my fate." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Are you willing to try again?" Yi Xian quickly shook his head. "Not now. My body is exhausted and can't bear that kind of power anymore. I need to rest for a while." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay. Then bring me to see the prisoner." Yi Xian nodded and stood up slowly, then said, "Young Master Yi, follow me." They continued to walk into the distance. At this moment, a loud laughter suddenly came from afar. Hearing this laughter, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. The next moment an old man appeared in front of them. Su Xiaoxiao quickly said, "Sima, Ghost King." Sima looked at the weak Yi Xian and laughed. "Yi Xian, you actually made yourself so weak. Heaven is really helping me, haha." As he spoke he was about to attack. At this moment Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he quickly walked to Yi Xian's side. "Sima, young Master Yi is here. Don't mess around." "Young Master Yi." Sima frowned and looked at Yi Xian. When he saw Yi Xian his eyes flashed with excitement. "Your bloodline is of the highest grade." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you want to devour it?" Hearing this, Sima's eyes suddenly showed a trace of wariness. He looked at Yi Xian. "You came in on your own accord." Yi Xian nodded. Sima stared at Yi Xian. "Who are you?" Yi Xian opened his palm and an ancient book appeared in his hand. He smiled. "The Dean of Guanxian College, Yi Xian." Sima shook his head. "Never heard of you." Yi Xian. Sima glanced at Yi Xian then pointed at Yi Xian. "This is between me and him. Don't interfere. Yi Xian shook his head. You can't kill him. Sima immediately pointed angrily at Yi Xian. Who do you think you are? The green profound sword on Yi Xian's waist suddenly slashed forward, and this strike carried a strand of terrifying sword insight from the mortal world. At the instant that the green profound sword flew out, Sima's expression instantly changed drastically. He swiftly raised his arms to block it. Bang! Sima was directly blasted 3 kilometers back, and as soon as he stopped moving, his arms had directly split apart while blood sprayed from them. A wisp of a solemn expression instantly flashed in Zhou Bai's eyes when she witnessed this scene, and she was extremely shocked in her heart. She knew that Yi Xian's strength was very formidable, but she didn't know that Yi Xian's strength was actually so formidable. After all, Sima was a universe-enlightened ancestral god. However, such an expert had actually been injured by a single strike of Yi Xian's sword. It was too terrifying. Sima stared fixedly at Yi Xian and said, "You're a swordsman." Yi Xian nodded. He opened his palm and the green profound sword trembled violently. At the same time, sword insight from the mortal world swept out from within him, and then a strand of terrifying sword aura instantly enveloped the surroundings. Sima's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly said, "We can talk. We can talk." Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Xiaota suddenly said, "Strange. Why aren't there enemies fighting to the death now?" Yi Xian gazed at Sima and said, "Talk?" Sima hurriedly nodded and said, "I'm willing to talk. Actually, I'm a scholar as well." As he spoke, he opened his palm and an ancient book appeared there. He gazed at Yi Xian and said seriously, "We're all scholars, so we should use the method of scholars to deal with things." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he nodded. "You're right. Let's talk reason." Hearing this, Sima was relieved. He glanced at Yi Xian and thought to himself, "This kid is quite easy to fool." In the distance, Yi Xian smiled and said, "Sima Ghost King, do you know why I'm here?" Sima hesitated for a moment and then he shook his head and said, "I don't know." Yi Xian pointed at Dedeabi on his waist and said, "Do you recognize this?" Sima glanced at Dedeabi and said in a deep voice, "Dedeabi." At this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. Yi Xian nodded and said, "Dedeabi, do you know what I'm here for?" Dedeabi was speechless. Sima shook his head and said, "I don't know." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Stupid. I'm here on Dedeabi's orders. I'm here today to save all of you." Hearing this, Sima was stunned and then said, "Save us." Yi Xian nodded and said, "Dedeabi knows that all of you are suffering here, so he specially sent me to save all of you." Sima was a little suspicious and said, "As far as I know, Dedeabi doesn't seem to be that kind." Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's really Dedeabi who sent me to save all of you. Follow me." Also Xian was speechless. Sima looked at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled and said, "You don't believe me?" Sima nodded. Yi Xian smiled and then said, "Then why do you think I have Dedeabi?" Sima was silent for a moment and said, "You're really here to save us?" Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, "It's absolutely true." Sima looked straight into Yi Xian's eyes and said, "Do you dare to swear?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Of course I do. Of course I do." At this moment, Dedeabi suddenly said, "Don't swear randomly, this oath is binding you." Xiaota suddenly said, "He has a sister." Dedeabi was silent for a moment and said, "Young Master Yi, do as you please. P.S. Where are your tickets? Give me one. I'm too pitiful." Chapter 2372. Sima instantly fell silent when he saw Yi Xian swear. This oath couldn't be made casually. After all, the stronger a cultivator was, the more binding the oath would be. Sima fell silent for a moment before he said, "I believe you." Believe. Actually, he wanted to be free as well. He had been trapped in this damnable place for countless years, and if this continued he would really be like a walking corpse. At this moment he had the chance to leave, so he was naturally willing to give it a try. In any case, he had nothing to lose, right? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he heard Sima. "Sima, how many people do you have under you?" Sima said in a low voice, "I'm at the peak of the Dao God realm. There are 2 more Dao gods on my side and there are 12 ancient gods." Yi Xian nodded slightly and then he turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I'm the only Tao god on my side and there are only 7 ancient gods. Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, the difference in strength between the two of you is so huge. How did all of you manage to coexist for so many years? Yi Xian glanced at Sima and said indifferently, IQ is still very important. Yi Xian was speechless. Sima flew into a rage. Yi Xian, what do you mean by that? Are you saying that I'm brainless? Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian's expression was calm. You said it yourself. Sima was furious and was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, our top priority right now is to get rid of them. What do you think? Sima glanced coldly at Yi Xian when he heard this. If we can get out, I'll crush your head. Yi Xian said calmly, up to you. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Let's go take a look at that prisoner. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. Zhou Bai glanced at Yi Xian and fell silent. If Yi Xian was really able to break out of this predicament, then it meant that Yi Xian would receive a huge group of extraordinary experts. This lineup was extremely terrifying. Zhou Bai sighed in her heart. At this moment she was even more worried about the clan. Not long after, everyone arrived at the center of a bluestone plaza. In the center of the bluestone plaza there sat a man. The man had shoulder-length hair and wore a simple robe. His head was slightly lowered. He also said in a deep voice, it's him. Sima glared at the man, his eyes filled with unconcealed rage. He was naturally angry because it was this man in front of him who had caused them to be imprisoned here for so many years. Yi Xian glanced at the man and said, do you know why he was imprisoned here? Just as he was about to speak, Sima suddenly said angrily, because of this playboy he slept with a woman and didn't take responsibility, so she took revenge on him. This is the kind of person who mercilessly pulls out his dick. Everyone, she glanced at the man and said softly, feelings are the most complicated things. You can't easily say who is right or wrong. As he spoke he shook his head slightly, I don't know the full picture so I can't evaluate it. Yi Xian glanced at Yi Xian and sighed in his heart. Cultured people really do speak differently. When he thought up to here he glanced at Sima again. Sima spoke coldly, it's the kind of person who mercilessly pulls out his dick. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian shook his head slightly and didn't waste his breath on Sima. Yi Xian walked slowly towards the man in the distance. He hesitated for a moment before he said, young Master Yi, I know something about Dao Yi. Yi Xian looked at Yi Xian and he spoke in a low voice. He's a top scholar in the human world. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Top scholar? Yi Xian nodded. As for anything else I'm not too sure. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. As he spoke he walked slowly towards the man. He glanced at Yi Xian first and then he turned to look at Zhou Bai. Miss, what's the background of this young Master Yi? Zhou Bai glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head. I don't know. Actually she was very curious about Yi Xian's true background as well. Meanwhile Sima spoke abruptly, who cares about his background? In any case he should be quite formidable. Otherwise he wouldn't dare to act so arrogantly. Everyone was speechless. Yi Xian walked over to the man. The man's eyes were closed but his aura was still there. Obviously he was still alive. Yi Xian sized him up and said, can we have a chat? The man opened his eyes slowly and looked at Yi Xian. What do you want to talk about? Yi Xian sat cross-legged in front of the man and then he smiled. About life. The man shook his head. Not interested. Yi Xian smiled. Then let's talk about literature. The man looked up at Yi Xian. You like to read as well? Yi Xian nodded. I'm Yi Xian, the dean of Xian Academy. The man fell silent for a moment before he said, Wu Wen. Yi Xian smiled. Brother Wen, I glanced at you just now, and you don't have any aura of cultivation, right? Mu Wen nodded. Yi Xian continued. The reason you've been able to live for so long is because of a mysterious force within you. She wants to keep you alive so that she can torture you, right? Mu Wen spoke softly. I deserve it. Yi Xian gazed at the man. Then do you think the people in this city deserve it? Mu Wen looked at Yi Xian. You came for them. Yi Xian nodded. Mu Wen spoke softly. I'm sorry. I begged her to let them go but... As he spoke he shook his head. She ignored me. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. What did you do? Mu Wen's expression was complicated. I let her down. Yi Xian said seriously. Abandon? Mu Wen looked at Yi Xian. Can you fall in love with 2 women? Yi Xian was taken aback. He hesitated for a moment and said, well, you like 2 women? Mu Wen nodded. Yi Xian was silent. Mu Wen looked at Yi Xian. Do you think it's wrong to fall in love with 2 women? Wrong. Yi Xian immediately said, you're gravely mistaken. Since you like one person, you should be faithful to her. How can you be half-hearted? What you're doing is very wrong. I despise you. Dadeabi's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Damn. You're invincible. Xiao Ta also sighed. In terms of shamelessness, even master can't compare to young master. Truly invincible. Yi Xian. Mu Wen sighed softly, his expression pained. I know it's my fault, but I can't help it most of the time. Sigh. Yi Xian said seriously, it's really not good for you to do this. How can you let her down? Mu Wen sighed again. I'm not human. Of course you're not human. Suddenly, a strand of terrifying pressure appeared here. Boom. In an instant, the expressions of Sima and the others in the distance changed drastically. Under this pressure, their bodies actually began to bend down slowly. Yi Xian's expression turned grim when he saw this scene. After all, Sima and the others were at the Tao God realm. Yet the other party had suppressed Sima and the others with just a pressure. How terrifying. At this moment, Yi Xian also felt that terrifying pressure. He frowned slightly, then waved his sleeves and the human world sword intent soared into the sky. Boom. The pressure that was pressing down on him was directly pushed back by his human world sword intent. The sound of footsteps suddenly resounded from behind Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Dadeabi suddenly said, you better be careful. The person who's coming isn't simple to you at this moment. Xiao Ta said, he has a sister. Dadeabi said furiously, motherfucker. Fine, he has a sister, he's awesome, I won't say anything else. Fuck. Xiao Ta. Yi Xian paid no attention to Dadeabi and Xiao Ta. He turned around and saw a woman walking over slowly from nearby. The woman wore a black dress that was embroidered with red plum blossoms, and it was luxurious yet carried a trace of evil charm. She was tall and her gaze was like ice. Amidst her coldness, there was a trace of breathtaking beauty. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, then looked at Mu Wen and said coldly, you are a beast worse than a pig or a dog. My sister treated you so well, yet you let her down and fed her sincerity to a dog. As she spoke, she suddenly became agitated. You're just an ordinary person in the human world. My sister took a liking to you and I don't know how many reincarnations you've cultivated, but you don't know how to cherish it and you let her down. Do you know that she's been imprisoned in the divine prison because of you? At the end of her words, she directly roared. Mu Wen lowered his head slightly, his expression pained. I'm sorry. The woman looked at Mu Wen coldly. I'm sorry. Useless men only know how to say sorry. Other than sorry, can you say anything else? Mu Wen asked with a trembling voice. How is she now? The woman's expression was calm. How can she be? Imprisoned, her heart is dead and she's already numb. Mu Wen suddenly burst into tears. The woman had a look of disdain. Yi Xian sighed softly and did not say anything. Matters of the heart were complicated, so it wasn't good for him to say anything. The woman suddenly turned around to look at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian smiled when he saw her look over. Hello. The woman looked straight at Yi Xian. You want to save him? Yi Xian shook his head. I came here to save the people of this city. The woman chuckled. That's interesting. You're not related to them, so why do you want to save them? Yi Xian smiled and said, I can't bear to see them, so I want to save them. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Then you'll have to defeat me. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, I don't want to fight you. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Yi Xian glanced at Mu Wen and then he sighed softly. Young miss, I can tell that you really care about your older sister. A woman who values family so much can't be a bad person. As he spoke, he cupped his fists. Young miss, Brother Wen deserves what he suffered and it's unforgivable. However, the people of this city don't deserve it. I hope that young miss can be merciful and give them a chance to obtain a new life. I'm counting on you. The woman gazed at Yi Xian and remained silent. Yi Xian gazed at the woman and spoke sincerely. Can I? The woman said, what you said earlier was very good. If you like someone, then you should be faithful to them until the end. As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian and said, Because of that, I'll let them off. As she spoke, she waved her right hand and in an instant the entire city shook violently. In the next moment, a black aura suddenly surged out of everyone's bodies, and after this black aura surged out of their bodies, it started to disappear bit by bit. At the side, Sima looked at the black aura surging out of his body and he was slightly confused. He turned to look at Xian. After a chat, we'll be free? Xian nodded. Sima's face was filled with confusion. It's that simple. We've been trapped for hundreds of thousands of years, and it's over after a chat. I feel insulted. Chapter 2373. Release. Zhou Bai looked at Xian with a complicated expression. She hadn't expected that Xian would be able to resolve the matter just by chatting with this powerful woman. Done. This was simply outrageous. This man's mouth was even scarier than his strength. If the clan continued to target Xian, then they were definitely not far from death. She had already secretly decided that once they got out, she would stop the clan from continuing to target Xian no matter what. Seeing that everyone was saved, Xian smiled faintly. Thank you very much. The woman looked at Xian. If I let them go, won't you do me a favor? Xian's expression froze. Sure enough, things weren't that simple. The Jianghu was complicated. The woman said, You're not willing? Xian smiled. Miss, please speak. The woman nodded. I think you're quite a smooth talker. How about this, you come with me to persuade my sister. What do you think? Xian. The woman looked at Xian. Is there a problem? Xian hesitated for a moment then said, This? I've never done something like persuading someone before. The woman said seriously, I believe you. Xian was speechless. Persuading someone? What the hell was this? The woman just looked at Xian not saying a word. Xian couldn't stand her gaze so he shook his head and smiled. All right, I'll try but I can't guarantee success. The woman nodded. All right. Xian asked, Are we leaving now? The woman nodded slightly. Yes. Xian thought for a moment then turned to look at Zhou Bai. Zhou Bai was silent for a moment then said, Young Master Yi, then it's time for us to part. Xian smiled. You're returning to the clan? Zhou Bai nodded. I want to go back and become the clan leader. She knew that there was only one way to save the clan, and that was to become the clan leader. Otherwise, if the clan provoked Xian again, the clan would be gone. Xian nodded. All right. Then he looked at Xian and Sima. Xian quickly said, I'm willing to follow young Master Yi. I won't hesitate to climb a mountain of blades or plunge into a sea of flames. Sima glanced at Xian and quickly said, I'm willing too. Young Master Yi, you're my big brother from now on. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Xian laughed heartily. Then the two of you can bring your men to the Universe of Gods Guanxian Academy. There a little fellow called Xianxia will receive you. He also bowed deeply. As you command. Sima nodded. All right. Xian gazed at Zhou Xian. The latter hesitated for a moment before she said, Can I go to your academy? Xian nodded. Sure. Zhou Xian glanced at Xian. Thank you. Xian smiled. You're welcome. Then he turned to look at the woman beside him. Miss, let's go. The woman nodded and grabbed Xian's shoulder. The next moment the two of them tore through space-time and vanished on the spot. Zhou Bai was silent for a moment before he turned and left. The rest of the people also left one after another. Not long later the entire fallen city began to celebrate wildly. Liberated. What Xian didn't expect was that many people in Fallen City were willing to follow Xian and the rest to Guanxian Academy. After all, they had been trapped for so many years. Everything in the past had turned to dust. To them, the most important thing now was to find a new place to stay. Obviously, Guanxian Academy was a very good choice. Not long later, the entire Fallen City experts of Fallen City got up and headed to Guanxian Academy. Somewhere in the spacetime tunnel, Xian and the woman traveled through spacetime. Their speed was fast. It was so fast that Xian's body couldn't bear it. However, he still didn't take out his battle armor and chose to bear it head-on. Xian glanced at the woman in the black dress beside him. She looked calm and didn't show any signs of abnormality. Xian was a little curious. How should I address you, miss? The woman in the black dress said, Wunren Lan. Xian nodded slightly. Wunren clan. The woman in the black dress nodded. Xian nodded and didn't speak again. Wenren turned to look at Xian. Have you heard of the Wenren clan? Xian shook his head. No. Wenren looked at Xian and didn't speak. Xian smiled bitterly. I really haven't. Wenren nodded. I believe you. As she spoke, she sized up Xian and said, your strength isn't weak. Moreover, you have a Dedeabi branch, so your background shouldn't be simple. Why haven't I heard of the Wenren clan? Xian thought for a moment and then he smiled. Perhaps it's because I'm not strong enough, so I can't come into contact with certain circles. Wenren fell silent for a moment before she said, what you said makes sense. But my intuition tells me that your background isn't simple. Xian smiled. Let's not dwell on this problem. Wenren nodded. Xian said, can you tell me about your sister and Mu Wen? Wenren expression instantly became ferocious. My sister went to the mortal dimension all those years ago and then she met this man. This man went to participate in the exam and he encountered danger on the way. My sister was kind enough to save him. However, she never expected that she would harm herself by saving him. Xian said, she fell in love with Mu Wen? Wenren nodded. That man is very good at flowery words. As she spoke, she glanced at Xian. Just like you. Stop. Xian hurriedly said, Miss Lan, can you not make things up? When have I ever been flowery words? Wenren expression was calm. I guessed it. Xian's expression froze. Wenren continued. There's no good person among scholars. Xian was speechless. Wenren raised her head and looked into the distance. She said softly, my sister secretly loved him and she even said that she wouldn't marry anyone but him. Unfortunately, her sincerity was fed to the dogs. After this man obtained that stupid scholar title, he actually married another woman in the imperial court. As she spoke, a wisp of viciousness flashed through her eyes, and then she flicked her sleeve. Rumble. The starry sky on the right was instantly obliterated. Xian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene. This woman's strength isn't ordinary. Wenren suddenly turned to look at Xian. You're also a scholar. Xian nodded. Wenren looked at Xian and didn't speak. The atmosphere wasn't right. Xian smiled. Not only am I a scholar but I'm also a writer. As he spoke he opened his palm, and a divine Tao code floated in front of Wenren. I wrote this. Xiao Ta. Dedeabi suddenly couldn't help but say, fuck. Wenren took the divine Tao code and looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Xian. You wrote this? Xian nodded. Yes. Wenren nodded slightly. Very impressive. As she spoke, she handed the divine Tao code back to Xian. Xian smiled. There are good and bad scholars too. I'm the good one. Wenren glanced at Dedeabi on Xian's waist. How did you get this? Xian smiled. Maybe it's because of my charisma. In a certain room in the Milky Way, a voice suddenly sounded. Fuck, fuck. Soon there was a series of angry roars in the room. In the space-time tunnel, Wenren looked at Xian without saying a word. It was as if she wanted to see through him. Xian smiled. Is there something on my face? Wenren shook her head. No. You seem sincere, but my intuition tells me that there's something wrong with you. Is my intuition wrong? Xian smiled. I don't want anything from this lady. Is there a need to lie to you? Wenren shook her head. Let's not talk about this anymore. I hope you can persuade my sister to let go of the obsession in her heart. Xian nodded. I'll try my best. Oh no, I'll try my best to persuade her. Wenren nodded and said nothing. The two sped up. Soon a white light appeared in the distance. Soon the two disappeared on the spot. When Xian opened his eyes, he was already in front of a grand hall. The entire hall was pitch black. It was incomparably gloomy and gave people a very uncomfortable feeling. Xian looked at the top of the hall. There were two large words. Divine Prison. Xian looked at Wenren. This is... Wenren's expression was calm. Divine Prison. It's a place that my Wenren clan uses to imprison people who have committed crimes. As she spoke, she led Xian towards the hall. Xian took a look around. Soon he narrowed his eyes. He sensed countless powerful auras. Every aura was at least at the ancestral god realm. Ancestral god. Xian was stunned. Are ancestral gods everywhere like dogs? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Brother Bai, are you trying to make arrangements for me again? I haven't even dealt with my clan, yet you've improved the map for me. Dedeabi fell silent for a short moment before he said, in any case you have a younger sister, so what are you afraid of? Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, a man appeared in front of Wenren and he bowed slightly. Second young miss. Wenren expression was calm. I want to enter. The man hesitated and seemed to be in a very difficult position. Wenren stared at him in silence. The man laughed bitterly. Second young miss, please. Wenren nodded and then she turned around to look at Yi Xian. Let's go. The man's expression changed drastically when he saw this and he hurriedly said, Second young miss, outsiders are absolutely not allowed to enter. Wenren gazed at him. Does my father have a son? The man was stunned and then he said, no. Wenren nodded. Who do you think the next patriarch will be? The man was first stunned and then his expression changed drastically. What the fuck? Aren't you the next patriarch? When he thought up to hear, the man instantly broke out in cold sweat and he hurriedly said, please. I didn't see anything. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately left. Yi Xian glanced at Wenren and remained silent. Wenren face was emotionless as she directly led Yi Xian into the hall. As soon as they entered the hall, a furious howl that carried terror suddenly resounded from the depths of the hall. The Insanity Devil Bloodline. This is the Insanity Devil Bloodline. You're not the green-clothed swordmaster. Who are you? Who exactly are you? The voice was filled with terror and disbelief. P.S. Find a place to make screws. Please introduce me to a good factory. Chapter 2374. The Mad Devil Bloodline. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly when he heard this. Someone sensed my bloodline? Meanwhile, Wenren turned around to gaze at Yi Xian and she was slightly puzzled. The Mad Devil Bloodline? Yi Xian took a look at the deep end of the hall and smiled. Who was the one who just spoke? Wenren expression was calm. A prisoner. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Can I go see him? Wenren nodded. Not for now. Yi Xian was stunned and puzzled. Why? Wenren explained, he's an extremely dangerous figure and he's been imprisoned for a few tens of thousands of years. Outsiders aren't allowed to come into contact with him. Yi Xian nodded slightly. He glanced at the depths of the hall. The hall was extremely long and it was impossible to see the end of it. It was like an abyss that was ghastly and terrifying. Wenren led Yi Xian down the hall. All along the way Yi Xian glanced at both sides of the hall, and there were some black cages on both sides. Some of these cages were empty while others were occupied. It wasn't long before Wenren led Yi Xian to a large cage. Yi Xian saw a woman within the cage. The woman wore a white dress and she sat before a wooden table. She had a peerlessly beautiful appearance, but there wasn't a trace of emotion on her face. She was just gazing at a black comb on the table. Yi Xian glanced at the woman. Needless to say, she was quite beautiful. Unfortunately, she wasn't a good person. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. If all the men in the world were as outstanding as I am, then there wouldn't be so many tragedies. Xiaotao was speechless. Dedeabi suddenly said, Fuck. Wenren gazed at the woman while a wisp of heartache flashed through her eyes, and she spoke with a trembling voice, Big sister. Big sister. The white-clothed young woman in the cage in the distance turned around to look at Wenren when she heard this, and then she grinned and said in a light voice, Little Lon. Wenren said in a ferocious voice when she saw the white-dressed woman's haggard appearance. You still can't let go of that dog of a man? After a moment of silence, the white-dressed woman shook her head and bitterly smiled. You don't understand. After saying that, she turned her head and continued to look at the comb, entranced. Wenren clenched her fists tightly. She was so angry that her chest heaved up and down like waves. It was a spectacular sight. At this moment, Wenren suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. You persuade him. Yi Xian was silent and a little speechless. How was he supposed to persuade her when it came to matters of the heart? Wenren looked at Yi Xian. If you can untie the knot in my sister's heart, I will agree to any condition. Yi Xian looked at Wenren. Are you sure? Wenren stared at Yi Xian. I'm sure. Yi Xian nodded. But you have to promise me one thing. Wenren said, so long as you can untie the knot in my sister's heart, then I'll agree to anything. Yi Xian nodded slightly. No matter what I do later, you have to support me. Can you do that? Wenren went silent for a moment and said, yes. Yi Xian suddenly turned around and unsheathed the green profound sword. The cage was directly torn apart by the green profound sword. Wenren was stunned when she saw this scene. What are you doing? Yi Xian glanced at Wenren. Prison break. After saying that, he walked over to the white-dressed woman. The white-dressed woman looked at him and didn't know what he was going to do. Yi Xian directly grabbed the white-dressed woman's hand. The white-dressed woman frowned slightly and was about to make a move. Yi Xian suddenly said, don't move. As he spoke, he looked towards the distance. Wenren was still stunned. Come here. Wenren hesitated for a moment and then she walked over to Yi Xian. Prison break? Yi Xian nodded. Wenren gazed at Yi Xian. After a short moment, she gave him a thumbs up while a charming smile arose on her face. You're a real man. Right at this moment, countless terrifying auras suddenly assaulted them from afar. Yi Xian gazed at Wenren. Come here. Wenren walked over to Yi Xian and Yi Xian grabbed her hand. Wenren frowned slightly. Right at this moment, the green profound sword was suddenly activated. In the next moment, the three of them vanished on the spot. On the other hand, not long after Yi Xian's group of three vanished, over 10 top-rate experts appeared where they stood just now. When they saw that the surroundings were completely empty, their expressions became unsightly. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded. After them. As soon as the voice resounded, all of them vanished on the spot. Moreover, a low voice suddenly resounded from the depths of the hall. The Insanity Devil Bloodline. Yi Xian utilized the green profound sword to bring Wenren and Wenren to Fallen City. At this moment, Fallen City was empty, and all the people who were cursed had left. However, there was still one person who hadn't left, and it was Mu Wen. Mu Wen was still trapped by Wenren. Yi Xian brought the woman in a white dress to Mu Wen, and then he let go of her and pulled Wenren to the side. Wenren gazed at Yi Xian. Why did you bring her here? Yi Xian's expression was calm. Whoever started the trouble should end it. Persuade? Yi Xian wasn't a god who could trick anyone. This woman was afflicted with a poison of love, and the only antidote was Mu Wen. Only Mu Wen could undo the knot in her heart. Wenren fell silent. The woman in a white dress gazed at Mu Wen from afar. At this moment, Mu Wen slowly raised his head to look at her as well. Mu Wen's voice trembled when he saw her. The woman seemed as if she'd lost her soul as she gazed at Mu Wen. Right at this moment, over 10 terrifying auras suddenly smashed down from the distant horizon. A wisp of a cold glow flashed through Wenren's eyes when she witnessed this scene, and then she turned around to look at the sky. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man appeared not too far away from her. Wenren's face instantly sank when she saw the middle-aged man. Uncle? The middle-aged man gazed at Wenren. You shouldn't have done this. Wenren fell silent. The middle-aged man glanced at Wen-Yi. Take the eldest young miss back. The experts behind the middle-aged man were about to attack when they heard this. However, Wenren suddenly roared furiously, Who dares? As soon as she finished speaking, she flicked her sleeve. In an instant, a terrifying imposing aura swept through the surroundings. The top experts hurriedly stopped when they witnessed this scene, and then they gazed at the middle-aged man and didn't dare attack. The middle-aged man gazed at Wenren. Are you sure you want to do this? Wenren's expression was ferocious. Yes. The middle-aged man fell silent for a moment before he said, Don't harm her. As soon as he finished speaking, the top-rate experts by his side charged directly at Wenren. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Wenren's eyes, and she vanished on the spot. On the side, Yi Xian slowly walked to Wenren. Wenren looked at Mu Wen in front of her without saying a word. Mu Wen was constantly apologizing. As she gazed at Mu Wen, who was ceaselessly apologizing, Wen-Yi's expression gradually changed slightly. Like, is this the person I used to like? Why don't I feel the same way when I see him again? There's only pity and sorrow. Wen-Yi suddenly turned around and gazed towards the distance. Wenren was in battle with the experts of the Wenren clan, and her eyes gradually became moist as she gazed at Wenren who was being besieged. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly spoke softly, "Do you still love him?" Wen Yi laughed bitterly. Yi Xian said, "Actually, you didn't love him anymore when he had a change of heart. But you haven't been able to let it go after so many years. Or perhaps you're slightly unwilling." As he spoke, he glanced at Mu Wen who was crying and spoke softly, "Let him go and let yourself go as well." Then he smiled, "There are many good men in the world and the next one will be even better." Wen Yi looked at Yi Xian and smiled, "How should I address you, young master?" Yi Xian smiled, "Yi Xian." Wen Yi nodded, "Young master Yi, thank you for bringing me to see him. You let me let go of my unwillingness." Yi Xian looked at Wenren in the distance, "You should thank her. Your sister loves you very much." Wen Yi looked at the sky and smiled, "Yes. It's enough." In the sky, Wenren suddenly stopped. As soon as she stopped, the experts of the Wenren clan naturally didn't dare to attack again. What a joke. Wenren might become the next chief of the Wenren clan. In the battle just now, they had been holding back and didn't dare to kill her. In the sky, Wenren turned around and looked at Wen Yi. The next moment, she appeared in front of Wen Yi. "Sister." Wen Yi touched Wenren's cheek and said softly, "I'm sorry." Wenren hugged Wen Yi. She hugged Wen Yi tightly. A moment later, Wen Yi looked up at the middle-aged man in the sky. "Uncle, I'm willing to go back to the clan to be punished." "No," Wenren said fiercely. "Sister, you can't go back to be punished." Wen Yi said softly, "Back then it was the Wenren clan who broke the contract. If I don't go back to be punished, will the Nantian clan let it go? I made a mistake, so I should bear it." Wenren wanted to say something, but Wen Yi shook her head and said softly, "Don't make things difficult for the clan. Back then I already made things difficult for the clan. Go back and tell father that I don't blame him. I never blamed him." Hearing this, the middle-aged man in the sky sighed. His expression was complicated. The Nantian clan. Wen Yi of the Wenren clan was engaged to the Nantian clan. However, Wen Yi suddenly fell in love with Mu Wen, which made the two clans very awkward. In order to give the Nantian clan an explanation, the Nantian clan had to put Wen Yi in the god prison. Now if the Wenren clan released Wen Yi, the Nantian clan would definitely be displeased, and it was very likely that a huge conflict would arise between the two clans. Of course, the core problem was that the Wenren clan's current strength was inferior to the Nantian clan. Because of that, even though Wen Yi had let it go, the Wenren clan had no choice but to continue imprisoning her. The middle-aged man sighed once more and then he said, "Eldest young miss, please return." The others behind him were about to attack. Meanwhile, Wenren was about to flare up, but she was stopped by Wen Yi. Wenren felt anxious in her heart. In a moment of desperation, she ran over to Yi Xian and grabbed Yi Xian's arm. "You definitely have a way. You do it." Yi Xian glanced at Wenren and felt a headache coming on. "Silly girl, do you think I'm omnipotent?" Chapter 2375. Wenren looked at Yi Xian with a trace of pleading in her eyes. Yi Xian was silent. Wenren glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head with a smile. "Don't make things difficult for this young master." Wenren didn't give up. She looked at Yi Xian. "As long as you can save my sister, I will promise you anything." Yi Xian was silent for a moment. "Really?" Wenren nodded. "Really?" At the side, the middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. What kind of person was he? He naturally knew that this young man in front of him was not simple. Facing so many top experts, this young man's expression didn't change and he was so calm. He was definitely not an ordinary person. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and two wooden tablets slowly floated in front of the two girls. "This is my Xian Academy's wooden tablet. To be honest, I am the dean of Xian Academy. If the two of you are willing to join Xian Academy, then your business is my business. Whoever wants to touch my student, I, Yi Xian, will be the first to not agree." Join Xian Academy? The two girls were stunned. At this moment, Wenren suddenly grabbed one of the wooden tablets and said, "I am willing to join Xian Academy." Yi Xian looked at Wenren. "Are you sure?" Wenren nodded. "I am sure. However, the premise is that you can save my sister." Yi Xian nodded, then turned to look at Wenren. Missy, what about you? Wenren was silent. Wenren looked at Wenren. Sister. Wenren was silent for a moment, then picked up the small wooden tablet. I am willing. Yi Xian smiled slightly. I declare that from this moment on, you are my Guanxian Academy's students. As he said, he looked at Wenren. Do you know why you can't save your sister? Wenren said in a deep voice. High strength is not enough. Yi Xian nodded. This is one of the reasons. The biggest problem is that you don't have the right. If you become the Wenren clan leader, who in Wenren clan dares to harm your sister? Wenren was stunned. The middle-aged man's expression suddenly changed, and his eyes were filled with vigilance as he glanced at Yi Xian. Damn it. This fellow isn't a good person. Wenren fell into deep thought after hearing Yi Xian's words. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly looked at the middle-aged man. How should I address you, senior? The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Wenren suddenly said, Wenren Zong is my uncle. He is at the peak of the deity transformation realm. His weakness is his divine soul. Wenren Zong's face darkened. Yi Xian smiled and said, Senior, I know the hearers are in a difficult position. How about this, let them follow me and I'll bear all the karma. Take it as you giving them a chance. What do you think? Wenren turned to look at Wenren Zong. Uncle. Can you help me? After a moment of silence, Wenren Zong sighed. Girl. As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Young man, are you sure? Yi Xian nodded. After a long silence, Wenren Zong said, Let's go. After that he turned around and left. Soon the hearers left one after another. Only Yi Xian and the other two were left. Wenren looked at Yi Xian. Master, do you know the Nantian clan? Yi Xian shook his head. Wenren smiled. If you don't know, how dare you say you'll protect us? Yi Xian smiled. Now you're my students. Since you're my students, even if the sky falls, I'll bear it. After that he walked into the distance. Let's go. Looking at Yi Xian's back in the distance, Wenren was lost in thought. He was lost in thought. Wenren walked to Wenren side and looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Sister, even if you want to find a man, you should find one like him. He's responsible, bold, and courageous. Wenren smiled. She pulled Wenren and walked away. Behind them, Mu Wen suddenly said in a trembling voice, Little E. In the distance, Wenren did not look back. I don't care if you're weak or where you came from. I only care about your heart. But in the end, you can't even give me your true feelings. Mu Wen, I regret knowing you. Hearing Wenren's words, Mu Wen was petrified. Wenren turned to look at Mu Wen, a disdainful smile on her face. Soon, the two women disappeared into the distance. Mu Wen stood there like a statue. Yi Xian brought Wenren and Wenren back to the immortal treasure realm. Seeing that Yi Xian had returned, Xiao Lan and Fu Yi, who had been worried, heaved a sigh of relief. Yi Xian looked at Fu Yi. Did you contact Miss Qin Guan? Fu Yi smiled bitterly. No. Yi Xian sighed. Did she do it on purpose? Fu Yi was also embarrassed because this had never happened before. Qin Guan was sometimes busy, but it had never been as long as this time. Yi Xian suddenly said, Forget it. Keep in touch. With that he walked to the side with the two women. Fu Yi looked at Wenren and Wenren curiously. Who are they? Xiao Lan blinked, then said, Why are you asking so many questions? Don't ask, understand? With that he turned and left. Fu Yi was stunned, then said, Why can't I ask? Xiao Lan was speechless. Yi Xian brought the two women to his training place. In the starry sky, Yi Xian and the other two sat facing each other. Wenren looked at Yi Xian with curiosity in her eyes. Wenren looked at Yi Xian calmly, not knowing what she was thinking. Yi Xian said solemnly, Miss Lan, can you tell me about this realm? Wenren nodded. You are now at the ancient god realm, above which is the ancestor god realm, and above the ancestor god realm is soul formation. I am at half-step soul formation and my sister is at the ancestor god realm. Soul formation. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Who is the strongest among the younger generation of your Wenren clan? Wenren pointed at herself. Me. Yi Xian looked at Wenren. Do you have a chance to become the clan leader? Wenren nodded. Yes. But to become the clan leader, one must be at the peak of the soul formation realm. It is too difficult to reach that level. Not only do you need luck but you also need a huge amount of wealth. With that she shook her head and smiled bitterly. At least 1,000,000,000 veins, and even the Wunrun clan can't easily take out 1,000,000,000 veins. Even if they can, they won't give it to me now. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and a storage ring floated in front of Wunrun Lan. In the storage ring there were 1,000,000,000 veins. Seeing this storage ring, Wunrun Lan was stunned. Yi Xian smiled. 1,000,000,000, use it first. If it isn't enough, I will raise it for you. Wunrun Lan looked at Yi Xian. Give it to me? Yi Xian nodded. Wunrun Lan glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Wunrun Lan stared at Yi Xian. Why do you want to give it to me? Yi Xian smiled. You are my student. Wunrun Lan glared at Yi Xian. Do you think I am so easily fooled? Yi Xian spread his hands. Then why do you think I am? Wunrun Lan said directly. Have you taken a fancy to me? Yi Xian was shocked. Wunrun Lan glared at Yi Xian. If you like me, just say it, don't beat around the bush. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. What are you thinking in that little head of yours? I give you money because I want you to reach the soul formation realm directly and then go back to fight for the position of the family. When you become the patriarch, I want to open a branch in your place. At that time I hope to get your help. Of course I have a lot of enemies so you can help me fight. That's basically it. Wunrun Lan was furious. Why don't you like me? Yi Xian's expression froze. Wunrun Lan wanted to say something but was stopped by Wunrun Lan. Wunrun Lan rolled her eyes at Wunrun Lan. How can you be like this? Then she looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, is what you just said your ultimate goal? Yi Xian nodded. I want to open an academy. Wunrun Lan asked. What kind of academy? Can you tell me about it? Yi Xian smiled and said, of course. Then he told her about his original intention of running an academy. After listening to Yi Xian, Wunrun Lan glanced at Yi Xian with a strange look on her face. Wunrun Lan looked a little serious. After a long silence she said, Are you serious? Yi Xian nodded. Wunrun Lan looked at Yi Xian. It's very difficult. Yi Xian smiled slightly. Where there is a will, there is a way. Wunrun Lan looked at Yi Xian for a long time, then nodded. I believe you. Yi Xian smiled and said, Thank you. Wunrun Lan suddenly said, But even if I have money, I can't reach the soul formation realm in a short time. Yi Xian smiled and said, What do you lack? Wunrun Lan said in a deep voice, Opportunity. Suddenly she took Dedeabi and handed it to Wunrun Lan. Take it. Wunrun Lan hesitated and then said, Are you giving it to me? Yi Xian's face darkened. I told you to take it, not to give it to you. Damn it. This woman is a bit dangerous. She is as shameless as me. Wunrun Lan curled her lips and then held Dedeabi. The next moment, Dedeabi directly raised her realm to the soul formation realm. After reaching the soul formation realm, Wunrun Lan was stunned. This? Yi Xian smiled and said, Feel the soul formation realm. Wunrun Lan slowly closed her eyes. After a long time she opened them. It's done. Yi Xian was speechless. Wunrun Lan glanced at Dedeabi in her hand, feeling a little reluctant. Seeing the reluctance in Wunrun Lan's eyes, Yi Xian hurriedly said, You can give it back to me. Wunrun Lan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian and then reluctantly returned it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian quickly put away the pen and then looked at Wunrun Lan. How long will it take for you to reach the soul formation realm? After a moment of silence, Wunrun Lan said, 10 years. Yi Xian frowned. 10 years. Wunrun Lan glared at Yi Xian. Very soon. Yi Xian opened his palm and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. Go inside and cultivate. It'll be done in a day. Wunrun Lan was stunned and then directly entered the Xiao Ta. After a moment she appeared in front of Yi Xian again. She looked at Yi Xian. Are you giving this tower to me? As she said that she had already hugged Yi Xian's tower with both hands. She looked like she was going to steal it. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 2376. Bandits. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. Why is this Wunrun Lan like a female bandit? At this time when Rin rolled her eyes at Wunrun Lan, You will scare young Master Yi. Let go. Wunrun Lan was a little unwilling but she still let go. Yi Xian quickly put Xiao Ta away. This woman was too dangerous. Wunrun Lan suddenly asked curiously, Why do you have so many treasures? Yi Xian smiled and said, It's a family heirloom. Xiao Ta. Wenren Lan glanced at Yi Xian and then said in a deep voice, "If I were to cultivate inside, I would be able to reach the divine transformation realm in a day at most. However, I want to use up all of your universe veins. Are you really willing?" Yi Xian nodded. "No problem." Wenren Lan remained silent for a long time before she said, "I'll return this favor once I become the Wenren clan's patriarch." After that she directly entered Xiao Ta's body. At this time Wenren suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, be careful of the Nantian clan." Yi Xian nodded and said, "Can you tell me about the Nantian clan?" Wenren nodded and introduced the Wenren clan and the Nantian clan to Yi Xian. After a while Yi Xian fell silent. Wenren looked at Yi Xian. "Do you regret it?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "How could that be?" A trace of complexity flashed in Wenren's eyes. "You are a mysterious person." Yi Xian smiled. "Missy, if you need anything just let me know. As for the Nantian tribe, I'll take care of it myself." With that he got up and left. Wenren looked at Yi Xian, who was leaving, with a complicated expression. Yi Xian had just left the hall when Xiaolan appeared in front of him. Xiaolan said in a deep voice, "Young Master Yi, something big has happened." Yi Xian frowned. "What is it?" Xiaolan's expression was solemn. "The clan's experts have arrived." Yi Xian was slightly stunned and then he said, "The experts of the clan have arrived." Xiaolan nodded. "They come with ill intentions." "They came with ill intentions." Yi Xian's expression became a little strange. Did something happen to Zhongbai? At this moment, more than 10 terrifying auras swept over from the sky above Celestial Treasure City. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the sky. In the sky, a man tore through space and walked out. Yi Xian recognized this person. It was the 7th young master. 7th young master looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Young Master Yi, we meet again." Yi Xian smiled and said, "So it's 7th young master." The 7th young master glanced at the surroundings and then he smiled and said, "Young Master, you must be curious about why my sister didn't come, right?" Yi Xian nodded. The 7th young master smiled and said, "She has been imprisoned and can't come." "Imprisoned?" Yi Xian frowned. "Your clan imprisoned her?" 7th young master nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Why?" 7th young master shook his head. "After she returned to the clan, she asked us to stop targeting you and immediately give up on targeting the Celestial Treasure Pavilion." As he spoke he sighed. "In the end she's a woman. Her hair is long but her knowledge is short." Yi Xian was speechless. 7th young master chuckled. "Young Master Yi, actually I really admire you, but..." As he spoke he shook his head. "But today you must die. Brother Yi, have a safe journey." As soon as he finished speaking he waved his right hand. Behind him an ancient god realm expert charged directly towards Yi Xian. However, before this expert could reach Yi Xian, his head flew into the air, and blood sprayed into the sky like a fountain. Instant kill. 7th young master was stunned. He was instantly killed. 7th young master gazed at Yi Xian with an astonished expression. You're that strong?" Yi Xian grinned. "Yes." 7th young master hesitated for a moment and then he said, "How many can you fight?" Yi Xian glanced at 7th young master and the others, and then he smiled. "All of you can come at me together." 7th young master's expression instantly changed and he hurriedly said, "Brother Yi, sorry for disturbing you." As soon as he finished speaking he turned around and was about to run. Right at this moment, a sword was already pressed against the center of his forehead. 7th young master's expression froze. Yi Xian grinned. "To the clan. To the clan." 7th young master spoke in a low voice. "Brother Yi." Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the 7th young master. He placed his right hand on the 7th young master's shoulder, and in the next moment he activated the Xianxia sword. Immediately after, he and the 7th young master disappeared from where they were at the same time, and the moment they disappeared, a sword suddenly flew across the field. In an instant all the experts that 7th young master had brought with him had been annihilated. Xiaolan and Fu Yi were dumbstruck. When did young Master Yi become so strong? At this moment both of them were beyond shocked. Young Master Yi kills ancient god realm experts as if he's slaughtering chickens? A short moment later Xiaolan spoke in a low voice, as expected of someone that the pavilion master took a liking to. Yi Xian utilized the green profound sword to bring 7th young master to the clan. As soon as he arrived, over 10 terrifying and formidable auras locked onto him. Ancient God Realm experts. In the sky above the clan, Yi Xian released 7th Young Master, and 7th Young Master gazed at Yi Xian. Do you know what you're doing? Yi Xian grinned. 7th Young Master, of course I know what I'm doing. 7th Young Master spoke in a low voice. It's not too late for you to leave now. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Thank you for your good intentions. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man appeared in front of him and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian flicked his sleeve. A ray of light suddenly slashed through the sky, and then the middle-aged man's head flew into the air before he could finish speaking. It was an instant kill. 7th Young Master's pupils constricted when he witnessed this scene, and his eyes were filled with shock. You? Yi Xian glanced at the clan below with a calm expression. Someone who can fight? The clan was speechless. Meanwhile, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared here, and then a middle-aged man in a luxurious robe appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. It was the patriarch of the clan, Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian gazed at Yi Xian. You've got balls for daring to come to my clan by yourself. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Cut the crap. Doesn't your clan want to kill me? Yi Xian am right here. Bring it on. As soon as he finished speaking, the green profound sword in his grasp suddenly flew forward. A ray of light tore through the sky like a thunderclap. It was so swift that Zhou Xian's expression changed. He opened his right hand and a huge black shield appeared before him. Rumble. The black shield shook intensely and then exploded. Zhou Xian, who was behind the giant shield, was sent flying 10,000 feet away. Zhou Xian was stunned when he saw the black shield shatter. How could this be possible? Yi Xian didn't waste his breath at all and he just flicked his sleeve and swung his sword. A ray of light slashed towards Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian's pupils constricted abruptly, and then a wisp of ferocity flashed through his eyes. He clenched his right hand tightly and smashed his fist forward. Bang! With this punch, a terrifying force erupted like a torrent. However, this terrifying energy was instantly dispersed as soon as it came into contact with Yi Xian's green profound sword. In the next moment, Zhou Xian was blasted over 10 kilometers away, and the space between him and Yi Xian had transformed into an extremely shocking and deep gorge. Zhou Xian, who was blasted back by Yi Xian's attack, had a dazed expression on his face. You're so strong? Needless to say, he was completely stunned at this moment. Didn't the intelligence say that it was extremely strenuous for Yi Xian to fight an ancient god realm expert? How did he become so strong now? Facing Yi Xian, Zhou Xian felt a deep sense of helplessness, especially the sword in Yi Xian's hand. That sword was too terrifying. Zhou Xian didn't dare to face it head-on, because if he did, he would either die or be gravely injured. In the distance, Yi Xian's expression was calm. You seem to be surprised by my strength. Zhou Xian glared fixedly at Yi Xian. You've been pretending to be weak all this time. Yi Xian chuckled and without another word he disappeared from the spot. In the distance, Zhou Xian's eyes narrowed. He clasped his palms together and in the next moment, a giant golden shield flew out from between his brows. The giant shield trembled violently, emitting a golden light. At the same time, Yi Xian's sword arrived. Rumble. As the sword light exploded, the golden light dissipated and in the next moment the green profound sword stabbed into the golden shield. Bang! The entire golden shield trembled violently, and then it split apart in the next moment. Zhou Xian's pupils instantly constricted to the size of needles when he witnessed this scene. Suddenly the entire golden shield shattered into pieces. Rumble. Under the gazes of countless experts in the surroundings, Zhou Xian retreated explosively for 30 kilometers. As soon as he stopped moving, his hands exploded apart and transformed into nothingness. At the same time, a sword slashed down towards him. Zhou Xian was horrified when he saw this sword slash down towards him. At this moment he was powerless to resist the sword attack. Right at this critical moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Zhou Xian, and a wisp of a vicious expression flashed in his eyes as he smashed his fist forward, causing a fist print to sweep out. Rumble. This fist print forcefully stopped Yi Xian's green profound sword. But in the next moment the fist print shattered, and then the green profound sword continued forward and slashed towards the old man. The old man was astounded when he witnessed this scene. Exactly what sword is this? Why is it so invincible? In the distance, Yi Xian was about to attack again when the old man suddenly said, "Wait." However, Yi Xian didn't stop at all and he slashed down once more. Bang! The old man was blasted 30 kilometers back by this strike. Yi Xian intended to attack again when the old man spoke abruptly. "My clan is acquainted with the Yang clan." The Yang clan. Yi Xian frowned when he heard this and then he gazed at the old man. "You know the Yang clan?" The old man instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this, and then he glanced at Yi Xian. "Yes, my clan and the Yang clan are family friends." Family friends. A wisp of bewilderment flashed through Yi Xian's eyes. That's utterly impossible. If these fellows are really family friends with the Yang clan, then there's no reason for them to not recognize my Mad Devil bloodline. Yi Xian shook his head. "No matter if you know the Yang clan or not, I'll annihilate your clan today." The old man was suddenly enraged. "If you dare touch my clan today, the Yang family will exterminate all 10 of your clans." Yi Xian. 7017K. Chapter 2377. Yi Xian was utterly speechless when he heard the old man. "The Yang clan annihilated 10 of my clans? What the hell?" At this time the old man suddenly said, "Your Excellency, even if you don't consider the monk, consider the Buddha." The Yang clan. Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the old man and spoke impatiently. "Is the Yang clan that great?" The old man was stunned when he heard this and then he exploded with rage. "How dare you look down upon the Yang clan? How dare you look down upon the Yang clan? You, the ignorant are truly fearless. Do you know what sort of existence the Yang clan is? That's..." Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand and slashed with his sword. The old man's expression instantly changed drastically when he saw Yi Xian suddenly attack, and he roared furiously as he charged forward and smashed his fist forward. A strand of terrifying force suddenly swept out from his fist like a torrent. In an instant the space in the surroundings seethed and warped. Bang! An expanse of light was blasted apart as the old man was blasted over 3 kilometers back by Yi Xian's attack. Moreover, he just stopped moving when another sword slashed down swiftly like a bolt of lightning. The old man's pupils constricted. He was astounded when facing this terrifying attack from Yi Xian because Yi Xian's green profound sword was truly too sharp. After he'd taken that punch head-on, his entire right arm had almost been chopped off. Right at this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly appeared in front of the old man, and a wisp of viciousness flashed through his eyes. After that, he roared furiously and smashed his fist forward. Rumble. With this punch, a terrifying force swept out like a volcanic eruption. Bang. An expanse of sword light shattered and it shot out like fireworks in the sky. In an instant the entire sky was in a mess. Zhou Xian was blasted over 3 kilometers away, and his body was completely obliterated as soon as he stopped moving. Zhou Xian suddenly roared furiously when he saw that Yi Xian was about to attack again. "Sacrifice the formation." The formation. Bang. His voice had just resounded when a pillar of light shot into the sky from the clan below. Yi Xian frowned slightly as he swung his sword down. Rumble. A terrifying explosion suddenly erupted in the sky, and Yi Xian retreated several thousand feet. After stopping, Yi Xian looked down at the clan below. At this moment, another pillar of light shot up into the sky. In the air, Yi Xian frowned. He opened his palm and the green profound sword slashed down. A wave of sword light fell from the sky like a waterfall. Boom. This attack directly shattered the pillar of light that shot into the sky, and Yi Xian was just about to attack again when the space above him suddenly split apart. A moment later, an enormous and illusory hand suddenly grabbed out. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. With a flick of his left sleeve, a wave of sword light shot into the sky. Mortal Realm Sword Intent. Rumble. As the terrifying sword light soared into the sky, the giant hand turned into fragments that filled the sky. Explosions rang out continuously in the sky above the clan, and it was a complete mess. Suddenly, Zhou Xian roared furiously from afar. "Kill him!" As soon as he finished speaking, countless pillars of light shot into the sky and shot towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He opened his palm and the green profound sword appeared in his grasp. He was about to attack when he seemed to have thought of something and stopped abruptly. "Why should I attack? Attacking is exhausting." Moreover, I have Ya's armor, so I don't have to attack at all. When he thought up to this point, he gave up on attacking and allowed the countless rays of light to blast him in succession. In the blink of an eye, he was drowned by an expanse of white light. Rumble, rumble. Numerous explosions resounded incessantly in the sky. Zhou Xian and the old man were stunned when they witnessed this scene. He doesn't defend? It didn't take long for the white light in the sky to disperse, and Xian appeared before them. Zhou Xian and the old man were stunned when they saw Xian. Because Xian was actually completely unharmed. Zhou Xian gazed at Xian with disbelief. You. Xian patted his clothes lightly and said, "That's all? That's all?" It was silent to the point a falling needle could be heard. Everyone was stunned. Right at this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly roared furiously, "Activate all the grand formations. Activate all the grand formations." As soon as he finished speaking, strands of terrifying energy shot into the sky from within the clan. In an instant, strands of formidable pressure swept through the world. On the other hand, Xian's eyes were closed slightly. He didn't dodge at all, and he just allowed the countless strands of energy to blast towards him. It didn't take long for Xian to be drowned by the terrifying energy once more. All the experts from the various clans stared fixedly at Xian. It didn't take long for the space where Xian resided to return to normal, and Xian appeared before them. When they saw Xian, the expressions of all the experts from the various clans turned extremely ugly. Xian was still completely unharmed. Zhou Xian looked at Xian in disbelief. "This isn't normal." Xian chuckled lightly. "That's it?" Zhou Xian stared fixedly at Xian and roared furiously, "What the hell are you wearing?" Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. In the next moment, the green profound sword in his hand suddenly flew out. The sword flashed like lightning. In the distance, Zhou Xian's expression changed drastically. He quickly dodged backwards, trying to avoid Xian's sword. Because he was currently a spirit body, he couldn't block Xian's sword at all. Moreover, he was shocked to find that Xian's sword seemed to have a strong restraining effect on spirits. Seeing the sword slash towards him, Zhou Xian's heart was already at its limit. At this moment, the elder suddenly stood in front of Zhou Xian and roared furiously, "Contact the Yang clan." After saying that, he turned to look at the sword slashing towards him and clenched his fists tightly. Boom! A terrifying flame suddenly shot up from his body into the sky. Body ignition. However, it wasn't over yet. In the next moment, another terrifying aura shot up into the sky from his body. Rumble. In an instant, Xian's sword was sent flying by this aura. In the distance, Xian opened his palm and the green profound sword returned to his hand in a flash. Xian looked at the elder. At this moment, the elder wasn't just burning his body, he was burning his soul as well. He was really playing with his life. After the elder chose to burn his body and soul, his aura skyrocketed. In the blink of an eye, his aura had reached an extremely terrifying level. In the field, the clan powerhouses all had sorrowful expressions on their faces. Body ignition. Soul ignition. This meant that they would undoubtedly die. The elder glared at Xian with eyes full of resentment. Xian shook his head and smiled. "Old man, I don't quite understand. What are you so resentful about? It seems like you were the ones who wanted to kill me first, right? Why do you make it sound like I'm in the wrong?" The elder said fiercely, "My clan has already admitted defeat. Why must you kill us all?" Xian frowned slightly. "Didn't I admit defeat before? Did you let me go?" "I don't think so." The old man pointed at Xian angrily. "Stop whining in front of the old man. Do you think you've won? Let me tell you, once the Yang clan arrives, you'll understand the meaning of despair." Xian sighed softly. "I suggest you don't scream, really." The elder was so angry that he started laughing. "Afraid? Are you afraid?" Xian. At this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly opened his palm, and a tiny token suddenly shot into the sky and into the depths of space. Xian glanced at Zhou Xian and fell silent. The elder suddenly opened his palm and clenched it tightly. Boom! In an instant, a terrifying force swiftly condensed in his hand, and the entire sect realm instantly trembled. In the distance, Xian's expression was calm, but the green profound sword in his hand was trembling slightly. At this moment, the elder suddenly roared, "Die, old man!" As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly rushed forward and punched out. When this punch was thrown out, A monstrous force rushed towards Yi Xian like a bolt of lightning. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly rushed forward and slashed down with his sword. Yi Xian's sword directly shattered the fist. At this moment, the elder directly rushed in front of Yi Xian and punched at Yi Xian's face. Yi Xian's right hand suddenly turned and a wave of sword light slashed out. Boom! The elder was directly sent flying thousands of feet away by his sword. The elder who had stopped was stunned. He never thought that he would still not be a match for Yi Xian even though he had already ignited his soul and physical body. The elder stared fixedly at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand, and his expression was incomparably ugly. Yi Xian had two divine artifacts in his possession. One of them was this sword and it was all-powerful. The other was a mysterious defensive divine artifact and it was indestructible. It was simply absurd. He had the strongest spear and shield. How could he fight them? The elder stared fixedly at Yi Xian while his aura grew stronger and stronger. However, it was useless because he couldn't break through Yi Xian's defenses. However, Yi Xian's sword could disregard all of their defensive divine artifacts. How could he fight them? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Stop spacing out. You're igniting your soul right now. If you don't fight them, then your soul will be incinerated into nothingness." The old man flared up with rage when he heard Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, what are you being so arrogant for?" Yi Xian shook his head. "Geezer, you have such a bad temper. How did you attain the universe enlightened ancestral god realm?" The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian while clenching his fists tightly. His physical body was gone and his soul was extremely ethereal as well. Obviously, he wouldn't be able to persist for much longer. He naturally wanted to attack, but he was very clearly aware that he wouldn't be able to harm Yi Xian even if he fought with all his strength. Yi Xian smiled. "Since you're not going to attack, then I'll do it." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia vanished on the spot. The old man's pupils constricted, and then he suddenly roared furiously as he suddenly pressed his palms together, and then he pressed them forward. Rumble! In an instant, a powerful force swept out from within the old man. However, it instantly shattered into pieces upon coming into contact with Yi Xian's sword, and then the old man was blasted over 10 kilometers back. Moreover, when he stopped moving, his soul was almost ethereal and translucent. Yi Xian looked at the old man and was about to attack again. However, right at this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly swept over from the depths of the distant starry sky. Wherever this aura passed, the space immediately boiled. Yi Xian frowned. The old man suddenly raised his head, and then he roared madly with laughter. "Yi Xian, the experts of the Yang clan have arrived. The experts of the Yang clan have arrived. You're finished. You're finished." P.S. Asking for votes. Friends with monthly votes, feel free to vote. 7017K. Chapter 2378. He's here? Yi Xian raised his head to look at the sky. In the distance, time and space suddenly split open and a black-robed elder slowly walked out. The moment the black-robed elder walked out, the entire space trembled and became illusory. An expert half a step into the divine transformation realm. As soon as the elder appeared, a wave of coercion swept down from the sky like a tidal wave. The powerful coercion was like the weight of a mountain, instantly stifling the breath of countless experts present. Everyone was shocked. This was an expert from the Yang clan? How terrifying. The clan elder and Zhou Xian, on the other hand, were laughing maniacally with excitement. Yi Xian released his human realm sword will, which easily blocked the elder's coercion. He glanced at the black-robed elder but did not say anything. Below, the elder, Zhou Xian, and the experts of the clan looked as if they had seen their savior. The Yang clan. The clan elder hurriedly bowed deeply. "Greetings, Your Honor." Zhou Xian and the others all bowed, their expressions filled with respect. The black-robed elder's expression was calm as his gaze fell on Yi Xian. "Are you the one who looked down on the Yang clan?" Yi Xian did not waste any time. He opened his palm and a stream of bloodline power surged from it. In an instant, the coercion of his bloodline shrouded the area. It was extremely powerful. He naturally had to reveal his identity. After all, he was the young master of the Yang clan. He could not possibly cause a misunderstanding with the experts of the Yang clan, right? Wouldn't that be stupid? Seeing the power of Yi Xian's bloodline, the black-robed elder frowned. What do you mean? Hearing this, Xian was stunned. You don't recognize my bloodline? The black-robed elder sneered. Should an old man recognize your bloodline? Xian was silent. Something was wrong. This guy did not recognize his crazy demon bloodline. This was not normal. Could it be that he was not from the Yang clan? Could it be that he was mistaken? Xian was puzzled. Meanwhile, the black-robed old man spoke coldly. Young man, do you know that my Yang clan is protecting this clan? Xian collected his thoughts. He glanced at the black-robed elder and asked, Is the Yang clan's patriarch the green-robed sword master? The black-robed old man furrowed his brows as a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. How do you know about the sword master? Hearing this, Xian's face darkened. Since you're from the Yang clan, why don't you recognize me? The black-robed old man narrowed his eyes. I'm from the Yang clan, so I have to know you? Who do you think you are? Xian glanced at the black-robed elder, then opened his palm and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. Do you recognize this item? The black-robed elder shook his head. I've never seen him before. Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta suddenly sighed in a low voice. Young master, this guy is probably just a small fry from the Yang clan. Don't ask him. He doesn't even know you and me. Just lay your cards on the table. Xian thought for a moment and nodded. He looked at the black-robed elder. Have you seen the green-robed sword master? The black-robed elder sneered. Of course. Xian looked at the black-robed elder. Don't you think I look very similar to him? The black-robed elder sized up Xian. The next moment he flew into a rage. Brat, you actually want to trick me? Why? Are you trying to say that you're the son of the green-robed sword master? What a joke. Who doesn't know that the sword master only has one daughter? How dare you? Xian's expression froze. Xiao Ta sighed in a low voice. Tragedy. What a tragedy. The black-robed elder suddenly flicked his sleeves. A terrifying force directly shook towards Xian. From afar, Xian frowned. He rushed forward and slashed down with his sword. The sword light directly tore that terrifying force into pieces. Seeing this scene, the black-robed elder frowned. You're a swordsman. Xian's face was expressionless. I suggest you contact the Yang clan. The black-robed elder said fiercely. You think you're worthy of my Yang clan's top experts? Xian felt a headache coming on. Can you not be so stubborn? Will it kill you to contact them? The black-robed elder did not give him a chance to speak. He directly rushed towards him. Seeing this scene, Xian's expression gradually turned cold. He opened his palm and the green profound sword in his hand flew out. Rumble. The sword light shattered. The black-robed elder was directly sent flying hundreds of feet away. At this moment, Xian suddenly grabbed a daobi and waved it. The tip of a brush flashed across the field. The black-robed old man's pupils constricted, and then he pressed his palms together while swiftly chanting. In the next moment he suddenly raised his head, and then a ray of black light swept out from within him and collided with the daobi's attack. Bang! Along with an explosion, countless rays of black light shattered while the black-robed old man was blasted 3 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped moving, the green profound sword slashed down towards him. A wisp of astonishment flashed through the black-robed old man's eyes. He opened his palm and a spear appeared in his grasp. With a shake of his wrist, the spear stabbed forward like a thunderclap. Bang! The black-robed old man's spear stabbed directly onto Xian's green profound sword. The entire sect dimension trembled violently, and then it swiftly became illusory. Meanwhile, the spear in the black-robed old man's hand suddenly shattered into pieces that covered the sky. Rumble! At the instant that the spear shattered, the black-robed old man was blasted 3 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped moving, his arms split apart. At the same time, the green profound sword pierced through the center of his forehead. All of a sudden, the entire place fell silent. The old man and the sect leader, Zhou Xian, looked at Xian in disbelief. Meanwhile, the black-robed old man was stunned as well. He was a half-step divine transformation realm cultivator, yet he'd actually lost to a young man at the ancient god realm. The black-robed old man's voice trembled as he said, "That's impossible." Xian's face remained expressionless as he flicked his sleeve. Bang! The black-robed old man's body was instantly destroyed. Right when the black-robed old man's soul was about to be completely destroyed, he suddenly took out a command token, and then the command token transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Xian glanced at the command token with a calm expression. Call for help. The black-robed old man stared fixedly at Xian. Yes. Xian nodded. Then let's do it. The black-robed old man glanced at Dedeabi on Xian's waist and sneered. So you're relying on Dedeabi. Let me tell you, the Yang clan is not afraid of Dedeabi. Even if Dedeabi himself came, he would have to crawl in front of the Yang clan. Xian was speechless. F***ck. Dedeabi suddenly said, Can I kill him? Xian said calmly, Didn't you say that you can't make a move at will? After a moment of silence, Dedeabi said, I can't make a move at will. I'll make arrangements for him. Xian was speechless. In the distance, the black-robed old man wanted to say something, but Xian suddenly flicked his sleeves and a sword plunged into the old man's mouth. The old man swallowed the words he was about to say. Xian looked at the black-robed old man and said, Shut up. The black-robed old man was speechless. As if thinking of something, Xian suddenly turned to look at the distant old man. At this moment, the old man's soul and body were growing dimmer and dimmer. Xian frowned. Can't you stop burning your soul? The old man was speechless. Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young lord, do you think everyone is like you? Burning your soul like it's a game that can be stopped at will? Once the soul is ignited, it can't be stopped. Xian glanced at the old man. Then you can slowly die. The old man suddenly laughed. His laughter was crazy. Xian, do you think you're invincible just because you have Dedeabi's support? Let me tell you, the Yang clan's strength is beyond your imagination. Just as the senior said, even if you have Dedeabi's true body, the Yang clan wouldn't fear you, much less Dedeabi's clone. Dedeabi was speechless. Xian didn't say anything. The old man snarled, Xian, I will die without a doubt. But let me tell you, before I die, I will make sure you die first. Xian nodded. All right. At this time, a terrifying aura suddenly swept over from the depths of the starry sky above their heads. Soon the entire galaxy began to boil. They're here. At this time, the old man suddenly burst into laughter. His laughter was extremely deranged. They're here. The true experts of the Yang clan have arrived. Xian looked into the depths of the starry sky. At that moment, an invisible pressure had already crushed down on him. This pressure far exceeded that of the soul transformation realm. Merely a strand of pressure caused countless people in the surroundings to feel suffocated. Too powerful. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man appeared here. An expert who had surpassed the divine transformation realm. The black-robed old man suddenly knelt down slowly when he saw this middle-aged man, and he said with a trembling voice, Envoy Zhang. The middle-aged man ignored the black-robed elder. He walked slowly towards Xian and knelt down in front of everyone. Emissary Zhang, the person in charge of the High God Cosmos, greets the young master. Young master. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings instantly became deathly silent. 7017K. Chapter 2379. Young master? Hearing Emissary Zhang's words, the black-robed old man and the sect master old man were petrified on the spot. In the distance, Xian looked at Emissary Zhang. You know me? Emissary Zhang nodded and said respectfully, Of course, I am the Yang clan's young master. How could I not know you? Xian pointed at the black-robed old man in the distance. Why doesn't he know me? Emissary Zhang smiled bitterly. He isn't from my Yang clan. Hearing this, Xian frowned. He isn't from the Yang clan? Emissary Zhang nodded. He is just a small character from one of my Yang clan's vassal forces. He has nothing to do with my Yang clan. Xian looked at the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man said with a trembling voice, Emissary Zhang, is he really the young master? Emissary Zhang was expressionless. Do you think I like to kneel to people? The black-robed old man's expression froze. After a moment he turned to look at Xian and smiled bitterly. Young master, since you are the Yang clan's young master, why didn't you say so earlier? Xian smiled. Didn't I say so? I said so. And how did you answer me? Your answer was that the sword master only has a daughter, no son. This is what you said, right? The black-robed old man, Yi Xian looked at the sect master old man. At this moment, the old man's soul had already been burnt transparent. Like a wisp of smoke, it would disappear with the wind at any time. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Is it interesting? Is it interesting? Yi Xian smiled lightly, turned and left. Behind him, Emissary Zhang was silent for a moment. He suddenly raised his right hand. The next moment, 10 terrifying auras suddenly appeared in the field. Emissary Zhang was expressionless. Slaughter. With that, he followed Yi Xian in the distance. Behind him, the old man roared, Yi Xian, I curse you. I curse you to die a horrible death. I curse your Yang clan to die. Tendo is clear. It's not that I won't avenge you. It's just that the time has not come yet. If you don't believe me, look up who did Tendo spare you. Boom. A bolt of divine lightning suddenly struck the top of the old man's head, and the old man was directly erased. After a while, a voice suddenly sounded from the depths of the distant starry sky. My Tendo clan declares that my Tendo clan has no evil intentions towards the Yang clan. This person's words have nothing to do with my Tendo clan. I hope young master Yi can understand. Clan. When Yi Xian returned to Celestial Treasure City, Envoy Zhang followed beside him. As he looked at Yi Xian, Envoy Zhang was very cautious. At the moment he was feeling very uneasy, because he didn't know if Yi Xian would blame him. Yi Xian turned to look at Emissary Zhang and smiled. Aren't you going? Emissary Zhang hesitated for a moment and said, I'll stay here and listen to young Master Ye's orders. Actually, the Yang clan had ordered that he couldn't take the initiative to help Yi Xian unless he was in a life-threatening situation. The reason why he chose to stay was because he had a selfish motive. If he wanted to climb up, the best way was to follow Yi Xian. To him, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Therefore, he decided to take the risk and stay. As long as he had a good relationship with Yi Xian, who in the Yang clan would dare to punish him in the future? If he had a good relationship with Yi Xian, he would be able to ascend to the 9 heavens. Yi Xian smiled and said, Are you at the divine transformation realm? Emissary Zhang shook his head. I'm at the superior god realm. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Superior god? Emissary Zhang nodded. The realm above the divine transformation realm is the superior god realm. Because I'm in charge of a special grade universe, I have the power of faith of a special grade universe. Therefore I'm a superior god. Yi Xian was a little curious. Special grade universe? Emissary Zhang nodded. It has more than 1 billion living beings and most of them are very strong. As he said this, he paused and said, Being a superior god is a threshold. It's too difficult for an ordinary person to become a superior god. Of course, that's for us. In the Yang clan, a mere superior god is nothing. Yi Xian blinked. In the Yang clan, a superior god is nothing? Emissary Zhang nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was a little curious. What level are you at in the Yang clan? Emissary Zhang smiled bitterly. Let's put it this way. If the Yang clan is compared to a huge empire, then I'm like a small village chief in a remote mountain village. Yi Xian was silent. Small village chief. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. It seemed that the force created by his father was much stronger than he had imagined. Go back to inherit the family property? As soon as this idea appeared, he rejected it himself. Although he was a second-generation heir, his ultimate goal was to be a first-generation heir. Emissary Zhang said again, Young master, do you want to return to the clan? If you do, I can contact the higher-ups. Yi Xian shook his head. Not for the time being. Emissary Zhang nodded slightly. Okay. Yi Xian said, I'll cultivate for a while you. Emissary Zhang quickly said, I'll protect you, young master. Yi Xian glanced at Emissary Zhang and smiled. Okay. After saying this, he entered the starry cultivation ground. As soon as he entered the starry cultivation ground, Wenren Lan appeared in front of him. Yi Xian looked at Wenren Lan. At this moment, Wenren Lan had reached the divine transformation realm. Divine transformation realm. Wenren also appeared in the field. Yi Xian said with a smile, Ms. Lan, congratulations. Wenren Lan nodded slightly. I'm the one thanking you. Yi Xian smiled. You should be the youngest divine transformation realm expert in the history of the Wenren clan, right? Wenren Lan shook her head. My ancestor is stronger than me. Yi Xian was slightly curious. The ancestor of the Wenren clan? Wenren Lan nodded. The ancestor of the Wenren clan was extremely talented, much stronger than me. Yi Xian smiled. You're very strong too. Wenren looked at Yi Xian. Merely being at the divine transformation realm isn't enough to become the patriarch. However, if I go back now, my status will be completely different from before. Yi Xian nodded and didn't say anything. Wenren said in a low voice, if I become the patriarch of the Wenren clan, what do you want me to do for you? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, open an academy in the Wenren clan, or allow my academy to recruit students in the Wenren clan. Wenren looked at Yi Xian. That's it? Yi Xian nodded. Wenren nodded. Okay. As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something and then she glanced outside. What is that person outside to you? Yi Xian was stunned and then he smiled. You mean Emissary Zhang? Wenren nodded. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said with a smile, my father's subordinate. Wenren looked straight at Yi Xian. Which clan are you from? Yi Xian smiled. The Yang clan. Wenren frowned and she turned to look at Wenren. Wenren shook her head. Yi Xian was curious. Haven't you heard of it? Wenren shook her head. Never. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, the upper divinity realm, have you heard of it? Wenren's pupils suddenly constricted. The upper divinity realm, your father is from the upper divinity realm. Yi Xian said, you know about the upper divinity realm? Wenren nodded with a rather solemn expression. The upper divinity realm is a super universe, and there are real upper divinity realm experts in that universe. Do you know about the upper divinity realm? Yi Xian shook his head. Wenren said in a low voice, it's very terrifying. No, not to mention the upper divinity realm, even a half-step divinity realm expert is very, very terrifying. After the divine transformation realm, there are 9 tiers, and beyond the 5th tier is the half-step divinity realm. In our place, the strongest expert is in the 6th tier of the divine transformation realm, but in the upper divinity realm, there are real upper divinity realm experts. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Is the Yang clan a big clan in the upper divinity realm? Yi Xian was silent. He didn't know how to answer this question because if he told the truth he would be suspected of being pretentious. At this time Wenren sized up Yi Xian and then she said, I didn't expect you to be from the upper divinity realm. Yi Xian said with a smile, what are your plans now? Wenren fell silent for a moment and then she turned to look at Wenren. Big sister, what are your plans? Wenren looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, I want to go directly to your Guanxian Academy. Although I'm not that strong, I should be able to help a little. Yi Xian smiled. You're welcome. Wenren was an ancestor god, and she wasn't weak at all to the current Guanxian Academy. What Guanxian Academy lacked the most were experts. After all, Xianxia was only one person and she still needed some help. Wenren smiled when she heard Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, if I go to your academy, the Nantian clan might not let it go. You have to be mentally prepared. Yi Xian was about to speak but he suddenly frowned. At this moment, Wenren looked into the distance. The Nantian clan is here. Nantian clan? Yi Xian frowned. Right at this moment, Emissary Zhang appeared behind Yi Xian, and he looked into the depths of the starry sky with a calm expression. Wenren, who stood in front of Yi Xian, took a deep look at Emissary Zhang, and a wisp of seriousness flashed in her eyes. She couldn't sense Emissary Zhang's realm, but her intuition told her that he was terrifying. Bang! At this moment the starry sky above them suddenly transformed into a huge vortex and soon, a man walked out slowly from it. The soul formation realm. When the man walked out, Wenren suddenly frowned. It was obvious that she knew him. Wenren's face sank. The man in front of her was the Nantian clan's prince, Nantian Yen. After Nantian Yen appeared, he gently flicked his sleeve with his right hand, and the vortex behind him was directly erased, and the starry sky returned to normal. Nantian Yen glanced at Wenren below, his face expressionless. The next moment he turned his head to look at Yi Xian, who was next to him. You're Yi Xian? Yi Xian nodded. Nantian Yen stared at Yi Xian. I heard that you like to meddle in other people's business? As he spoke, an invisible wave of pressure swept towards Yi Xian, who was down below. Yi Xian frowned slightly and was about to make a move, but at this moment, Emissary Zhang suddenly spread out his right hand and gently pressed it down. Thump! Under everyone's shocked gaze, Nantian Yan's legs went soft and he knelt down. Emissary Zhang looked at Nantian Yan, whose face was full of fear with a calm expression. You have to kneel to talk to my young master, understand? Everyone, Zhou Xian. 7017K. Chapter 2380. Kneeling. Nantianyan just knelt there. No matter how he resisted, it was useless. At this moment Nantianyan was extremely shocked. He was a cultivator in the divine transformation realm, but he couldn't even resist this middle-aged man? How was this possible? He looked incredulous. Wenren Lan and her sister also looked incredulous, especially Wenren Lan. She knew that this middle-aged man was strong, but she didn't know he was this strong. With a wave of his hand, an expert in the divine transformation realm knelt. This was at least a half-step supreme deity. At this time Nantianyan looked at Emissary Zhang and said in a deep voice, "You are?" Emissary Zhang did not answer. He retreated half a step behind Zhou Xian. Seeing this, Nantianyan looked at Zhou Xian again. "Who are you?" Zhou Xian smiled slightly. "Zhou Xian, the dean of Xian Academy." Nantianyan stared at Zhou Xian, not knowing what he was thinking. Zhou Xian turned to Emissary Zhang and said with a smile, "Let him stand up and talk." Emissary Zhang immediately nodded. "Okay." With that he flicked his sleeve and the terrifying power on Nantianyan suddenly disappeared. After Nantianyan stood up, he took a deep look at Emissary Zhang. In addition to seriousness, there was also fear in his eyes. Zhou Xian smiled and said, "How should I address you, sir?" Nantianyan withdrew his gaze and looked at Zhou Xian. "Nantianyan of the Nantian clan." Zhou Xian nodded and was about to speak when Nantianyan said in a deep voice, "Sir, the Nantian clan has no enmity with you. Why are you meddling?" Zhou Xian turned to look at Wenren Lan. "She doesn't like you." Nantianyan nodded. "I know she doesn't like me, but she is engaged to me. Do you think it's appropriate for her to fall in love with another man while we are still engaged?" Zhou Xian thought about it and shook his head. "No." Nantianyan was slightly stunned. Was this guy so reasonable? Zhou Xian continued, "It's indeed inappropriate for me to fall in love with someone else when I'm engaged to you. This is her fault, but she has already paid the price for her mistake." Nantianyan fell silent. Zhou Xian still wanted to say something, but Nantianyan suddenly said, "Since young Master Yi has spoken, then I naturally won't pursue the matter any further. I'll give young Master Yi face." Zhou Xian was silent. With this guy's words, it became like he owed him a favor. Speechless, Nantianyan suddenly looked at Wenren and said, "Miss Yi, the grudge between us is settled today. Let's both live in peace." After saying that, he looked at Zhou Xian. "Young Master Yi, if you have time, please come to the Nantian clan as a guest." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Definitely." Nantianyan smiled, "Farewell." After saying that, he turned and disappeared at the end of the starry sky. Zhou Xian looked at the end of the sky and chuckled. Then he turned to Wenren and said, "You're really free now." Wenren looked at Zhou Xian and said, "Thank you." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "You're welcome." After saying that, he looked at Wenren Lan and asked, "Are you going back to the clan now?" Wenren Lan nodded. "If I go back now, I'll definitely be put in an important position. However, I'm not sure if I can become the clan leader. After all, my father hasn't died yet." "Oh no, he hasn't retired." Hearing that, Zhou Xian's face was full of black lines. She was really a filial daughter. Wenren Lan turned to Wenren and asked, "Sister, are you really not going back with me?" Wenren Lan shook her head, "No." Wenren Lan thought about it and said, "All right. After I become the clan leader, I'll come and pick you up." After saying that, she looked at Zhou Xian and asked, "Can you lend me your pagoda for a few days to play?" Zhou Xian's face was full of black lines. Wenren Lan giggled, "I'm kidding." After saying that, she said seriously, "You helped me reach the soul formation realm. I'll remember this for the rest of my life. After I become the clan leader, I'll do my best to help your academy." After saying that, she disappeared on the spot. Zhou Xian shook his head and smiled. He looked at Wenren and said, "Go to the universe of God's Xian Academy first. After you get there, a little girl will take care of you." Wenren Lan nodded, "All right." In the same place, Zhou Xian opened his palm and a storage ring appeared in his hand. He only had less than 100 million universe veins left. It had to be said that he still felt a little distressed. However, it was still worth it. As long as Wenren Lan became the clan leader, Guanxian Academy would be able to reach the Wenren clan. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian opened his palm and a sword intent suddenly gushed out. The sword intent of the human world. Looking at the sword intent in front of him, Yi Xian fell silent. The sword intent had become stronger again. Furthermore, it was much stronger. Tingqiu. Yi Xian withdrew the sword intent and felt warm in his heart. At this moment, Emissary Zhang suddenly said, "Young master's sword intent is amazing." Yi Xian turned to look at Emissary Zhang and smiled. "Is it amazing?" Emissary Zhang nodded with a serious expression. "Young master's sword intent has unlimited growth." Yi Xian laughed and said, "Aren't you going back to the upper god realm?" Emissary Zhang hurriedly said, "I'll follow young master and serve him." Yi Xian thought for a moment and nodded, "All right." Emissary Zhang was overjoyed when he heard that. Since Yi Xian agreed, it meant that he could follow Yi Xian openly. As long as he followed Yi Xian, his future would be limitless. Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'll cultivate for a while." Emissary Zhang hurriedly nodded, "All right." As he spoke, he left respectfully. In the starry sky, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In the next moment he entered Xiao. Within Xiao Ta, his eyes closed slowly. Dedeabi's body trembled slightly. In the next moment, his cultivation directly rose from the ancient god realm to the universe enlightened ancestral god realm. When he attained the universe enlightened ancestral god realm, the sword intent within his body suddenly surged out like tidewater. Actually, his sword intent was equivalent to the energy of faith. Boundless energy of faith converged into a sword, and it became the sword intent of the human world. Yi Xian cultivated slowly within Xiao Ta. With Xiao Ta by his side, he could take his time because he had sufficient time. Just like that, 10 years passed. In the outside world, only a single day had passed. When Yi Xian left Xiao Ta, he had attained the universe enlightened ancestral god realm. Unlike before, his cultivation wasn't unstable this time, and he used almost 10 years of time to stabilize it. Of course, he still needed actual combat. What gave him a headache was that he needed a huge amount of money to break through to the soul formation realm. Just like Wenren Lan, he needed at least over 1 billion universe veins. Over 1 billion. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. At this moment he thought of Qin Guan. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I really want to live off a woman more and more." Besides cultivation, he'd also studied the character human in the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra. At this moment, the might of this character was only inferior to his instant of invincibility. The most terrifying thing was that he was still only able to utilize 10% of this character's might. To his surprise, if he utilized his sword intent when he utilized this character, its might would multiply. In short, even though he was only at the universe enlightened ancestral god realm, it was extremely easy for him to kill a soul formation realm expert. However, he still felt an extremely terrifying pressure when facing Emissary Zhang. Obviously, a high god realm expert was still a huge threat to him. After attaining the universe enlightened ancestral god realm, Yi Xian left the place of cultivation. As soon as he left, Emissary Zhang appeared in front of him. Emissary Zhang bowed slightly, and then he retreated behind Yi Xian. At this moment, Emissary Zhang was shocked because Yi Xian had attained the universe enlightened ancestral god realm. So fast. After all, Yi Xian was only at the ancient god realm a day ago, yet he was already a universe enlightened ancestral god now. This speed was truly slightly abnormal. Emissary Zhang sighed in his heart. As expected of the young master. Meanwhile, Fu Yi and Xiaolon appeared in front of Yi Xian, and they bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "It's over. I'm going back to my academy." As he spoke, he looked at Fu Yi. "Did you manage to contact Qin Guan?" Fu Yi shook his head. "No." Yi Xian smiled. "If you didn't manage to contact him, then forget it." Fu Yi smiled bitterly. Yi Xian smiled. "Both of you take care." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot with Emissary Zhang. After Yi Xian and Xiaolon left, Fu Yi suddenly said in a light voice, "Young Master Yi has already attained the universe enlightened ancestral god realm." Xiaolon nodded with a solemn expression. Fu Yi shook his head and smiled. "Young Master Yi's speed of improvement is truly terrifying." Xiaolon said in a light voice, "Do you see that person beside him?" Fu Yi frowned slightly. "Who is that?" Xiaolon said in a low voice, "The annihilation of the clan was done by that person." Fu Yi. Xiaolon said, that person should be a member of the Yang clan. As he spoke, he looked towards the horizon and said in a light voice, is the mysterious Yang clan finally about to surface? Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy with emissary Zhang. At this moment, the number of people in Guanxian Academy had expanded to tens of thousands. This was only the number of people in the universe enlightened ancestral god. In other places, Qingqiu had already developed more than a dozen branches of Guanxian Academy. The main reason why the number of people was small was that Guanxian Academy's recruitment was too strict. This strictness did not refer to talent but character and temperament. Everyone who entered Guanxian Academy would have to undergo various tests. It was precisely because of this that Guanxian Academy's recruitment speed was not very fast. However, now that Guanxian Academy's reputation had spread, more and more people took the initiative to come to Guanxian Academy, hoping to join it. The current dean of Guanxian Academy was Yi Xian, the head of the Wen Academy was Zhou Xian, and the head of the Wuyuan Academy was Qingqiu. However, Qingqiu's authority was undoubtedly the greatest, because Zhou Xian spent more time teaching and learning, while Yi Xian was a hands-off boss. Therefore, Qingqiu was completely in charge of Guanxian Academy. When Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy, Qingqiu immediately appeared in front of him. Looking at Yi Xian, Qingqiu smiled sweetly, brother. Yi Xian had just spoken, but in the next moment his face was full of astonishment. Girl, you have reached the universe enlightened ancestral god realm? Qingqiu nodded, yes. Yi Xian frowned slightly. When did you reach it? Qingqiu blinked. Just now. Just now. Yi Xian was stunned and his heart was filled with shock. The corners of Qingqiu's mouth rose slightly. As long as she wanted to, she could walk to the end of the path of martial arts and Dao Yi, and be on par with 3 swords. But she didn't want to. She wanted to follow her brother. Invincible? How boring would that be? Whenever Yi Xian was invincible, she would be invincible. 7017K. Chapter 2381. Although he knew that Qingqiu was monstrous, Yi Xian was still shocked. Ancestor God Realm. This girl actually reached the Ancestor God Realm in such a short time. The reason why he could reach the Ancestor God Realm was because he had Xiao Ta and Dedeabi, but Qingqiu had nothing. Could a person really be monstrous to this extent? However, when he thought that this girl was Qing'er's original body, he felt relieved. Qing'er. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts. He gently rubbed Qingqiu's little head and chuckled. Amazing. Qingqiu smiled sweetly. She hugged Yi Xian's right side and leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. She whispered, Big brother is the best. Yi Xian laughed. After spending half a day with Qingqiu got up and left. Yi Xian didn't know what she was going to do. Anyway, this girl was very busy recently. Yi Xian also learned that the entire Guanxian Academy had nearly 100 branches, and the scale was still expanding. Under the leadership of Qingqiu, the current Guanxian Academy had made a name for itself. In the past, Guanxian Academy took the initiative to find people, but now, countless monstrous geniuses took the initiative to look for Guanxian Academy wanting to join it. As the number of people increased, Yi Xian received more and more power of faith. And this was just the beginning. Qingqiu had begun to let some academies stand above the major forces, and then the academies set the rules. Whether it was the major forces or those empires, they must abide by the rules set by Guanxian Academy. Qingqiu chose a more gentle method instead of bloody suppression. Anyone who followed the academy would be greatly improved. After all, Guanxian Academy now had many cultivation methods, and these cultivation methods were far beyond the world's martial arts civilization. Under such temptation, those forces did not resist Guanxian Academy. In front of Guanxian Hall, Yi Xian was lying on a chair, the sun shining on him warmly. Deep in thought. Presently, the academy was on the right track and he himself had attained the universe enlightened ancestral god realm. Now that he wanted to attain the soul transformation realm, the relationship between him and the academy could be said to be getting better and better. The future. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. He had to think about the future. Walk out. If he stayed in this cosmos, he would naturally be invincible with his strength. However, he didn't like this kind of false invincibility. Only by going out and meeting more experts could he better improve himself. Of course, the main reason was that he really needed money now. Guanxian Academy was still spending money now and he needed money even more. In addition, he still owed Qingguan 2 billion. This sum of money must be returned. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed softly. After a while, Yi Xian stood up and went to find Envoy Zhang. Upon seeing Yi Xian, Envoy Zhang bowed slightly. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian looked at Emissary Zhang and smiled. Senior Emissary Zhang, do you have money? Emissary Zhang was slightly stunned and then he smiled. How much does young Master Yi need? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, give me 2 billion Ian veins first. Emissary Zhang was stunned when he heard this. Yi Xian blinked. Is that a lot? Emissary Zhang smiled bitterly. Young Master, I don't have that many Ian veins. Yi Xian frowned slightly. You don't even have it in the God Realm? Emissary Zhang shook his head. No, the God Realm only produces around 1 billion Ian veins every year, and after deducting various expenses, there's only 100 to 200 million left. As he spoke, he smiled bitterly. Young Master might not know this, but even though I'm the Realm Lord of the God Realm, this position was conferred by the Yang clan. In other words, I'm just someone who receives a salary every year. In the mortal world, I'm equivalent to a county magistrate. Yi Xian understood when he heard this. Even though Emissary Zhang was the Realm Lord of the God Realm didn't belong to him but to the Yang clan. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. At this moment he thought of Qingguan again. This rich woman could casually open an immortal treasure pavilion, and the profits she earned was much more than an entire realm. At this moment, Emissary Zhang suddenly asked, Young Master is in need of money? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Emissary Zhang smiled. Young Master, if you are in need of money, you can go to a place. Yi Xian was a little curious. What place? Emissary Zhang smiled. Luo Realm. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Luo Realm? Emissary Zhang nodded. Luo Realm is a great realm that I know of. In this Luo Realm, there are close to hundreds of thousands of universe worlds. They produce at least 10 billion Ian veins every year. If young Master is in need of money, you can go to the Luo Realm and find the Luo Realm Lord. Yi Xian said solemnly, will he give it to me? Emissary Zhang smiled bitterly. Young Master, why wouldn't he? Would he dare to not give it? He's just working for you. The money is yours. Yi Xian blinked. It's mine? Emissary Zhang nodded. Of course. You're the young master of my Yang clan. Everything in the Yang clan is yours, right? Yi Xian nodded hurriedly. Yes. Emissary Zhang smiled. So, are we going to the Luo Realm? Yi Xian said with a smile. Go. Emissary Zhang nodded. All right. With that said, he opened his palm. A huge round plate appeared in his hand. The next moment, the round plate flew out and turned into a blue light that landed in front of the two of them. Emissary Zhang said solemnly, the Luo Realm is too far away from this realm. Even with young masters and my strength, if we were to travel through time, it would take at least 100 years. So, we have to use this teleportation array to teleport to the Star Realm. There is a teleportation station established by the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. We have to go to the Luo Realm from there. Yi Xian frowned. 100 years. Emissary Zhang nodded. The universe is so big that it's hard to imagine. Yi Xian was silent. He recalled what Qing'er once said. The current universe and the boundless universe. Now he was still in the current universe. Outside the current universe there was another boundless universe. Thinking of this, Yi Xian felt a headache. Damn it. This is toxic. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. What kind of existence do I belong to in the current universe and the boundless universe? Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this problem. No matter how big the universe was, it was best to walk the path that he had now. After Yi Xian handed over the matters of the academy, he entered the teleportation array with Emissary Zhang. As soon as he entered the teleportation array, Yi Xian realized that countless starry skies were shuttling past him. They were shuttling through time and space at a terrifying speed. Yi Xian turned to look at Emissary Zhang. Senior Emissary Zhang. Emissary Zhang hurriedly said, Young Master, don't call me senior. You can just call me Old Zhang. Yi Xian smiled. All right. Old Zhang, let me ask you a question. You are at the High God state, right? Emissary Zhang nodded. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, Are there many High God state experts in the Luo world? Emissary Zhang shook his head. Not many. In the entire Luo world, there are no more than 2 high god state experts. Yi Xian didn't understand. Why? Emissary Zhang bitterly smiled. To reach the high deity realm, one needs an enormous amount of wealth and the power of faith. Back then, when I reached the high deity realm from the 9th stage of soul formation, it took me a total of 700,000 years. As for the time vein, I spent over 10 billion. This was because I had some fortuitous encounters. Otherwise, I wouldn't have reached the high god state. Other than that, because I am the lord of the high god world, I received the faith energy of the entire high god world. With the support of the faith energy, I reached the high god state. Saying this, he shook his head. None of these conditions are lacking. Therefore, even in the Luo world, there aren't many high god state experts. Even in a big world like the Luo world, there can only be 2 high god state experts. That's almost the limit. High god. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Emissary Zhang continued. I took a look at the college that young master established. If young master's college grows, it will be terrifying. Yi Xian smiled. Why do you say that? Emissary Zhang said in a deep voice, because the young master's power of faith is very pure. I have never seen such a pure power of faith. If the young master's academy continues to grow, one day the young master's power of faith will become very, very terrifying. Yi Xian smiled. It will become bigger and bigger. Emissary Zhang looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything else. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Old Zhang, what is the realm above the high god state? Emissary Zhang was about to say something when a white light appeared in the distance. In the next moment, he and Yi Xian disappeared into the space-time tunnel. In next to no time, the 2 of them appeared on a teleportation platform. Yi Xian looked around. At this moment, he was in a boundless starry sky, and beneath his feet was a transportation platform. Around them, there were so many transportation platforms that one couldn't see the end of them with a single glance. There were at least 1 million teleportation platforms in this starry sky. Yi Xian was slightly surprised and shocked. He hadn't expected that there would be so many teleportation platforms in this starry sky. At this moment, an old man appeared in front of Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang. The old man glanced at the teleportation formation behind Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang, and then he said, 300,000. 300,000. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, 300,000 universe veins? The old man nodded. Exactly. Yi Xian's face darkened. 300,000 universe veins for a single teleportation? The old man gazed at Yi Xian. Young master is quite far from here, so the fee is 300,000 universe veins. Yi Xian remained silent. That money pot was too profitable. Just this teleportation formation alone brought in a huge amount of profit for this rich woman every single day. Emissary Zhang wasn't very surprised, and he was about to take out some money. However, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and a command token appeared there. He passed it to the old man, and the old man's expression changed drastically when he saw the command token. He spoke with a trembling voice. This? Are you young Master Yi? Yi Xian nodded. The old man laughed bitterly. Young Master Yi, I'm sorry if I offended you just now. Yi Xian smiled. I didn't offend you at all. The old man hurriedly said, since you're young Master Yi, then you don't have to pay any fees. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I'm a super VIP of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, right? The old man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, according to my knowledge, the Immortal Treasure Pavilion has a loan program. I want to get a loan, and Miss Qin Guan is my guarantor. How much can I get? The old man was speechless. P.S. Sorry, something unexpected happened while I was washing my feet last night. 7,017K. Chapter 2382. Alone. The old man instantly became embarrassed when he heard Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, what's wrong? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, young Master Yi, I'm just a small person in charge here. I don't have the authority to decide on a loan. Young Master Yi can look for President Lan Shan at the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. President Lan Shan. Yi Xian nodded. Where is he? The old man hurriedly pointed to the right. Go 5,000 kilometers away from here. There's a branch of my Immortal Treasure Pavilion there, and President Lan Shan is there. Yi Xian nodded. All right. As soon as he finished speaking, he brought emissary Zhang along and vanished into the distance. In next to no time, Yi Xian and emissary Zhang arrived at the Immortal Treasure Pavilion's branch. As soon as Yi Xian arrived, an old man came out to greet him, and the old man bowed slightly. Are you young Master Yi? Yi Xian nodded. I am. The old man bowed once more. Young Master Yi, please enter. Yi Xian smiled. Is your president here? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, He isn't here. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He isn't here? The old man nodded. Yes, the president had something to do not too long ago, and he has been gone for a long time. Yi Xian fell silent. He isn't here. Yi Xian glanced at the hall behind the old man. Meanwhile, emissary Zhang, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke in a low voice. Young master, he's here. Do you want me to drag him out? Yi Xian chuckled. There's no need for that. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Emissary Zhang glanced at the Immortal Treasure Pavilion in the distance, and then he turned around and left as well. After Yi Xian and emissary Zhang vanished into the horizon, a middle-aged man appeared here, and the old man hurriedly bowed respectfully. President. The middle-aged man was the president of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion's branch, Lan Shan. Lan Shan gazed at the horizon and remained silent. The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, President, why don't you see this young Master Yi? Lan Shan said softly, This young Master Yi is here for a loan. With that said, he shook his head. I don't want to give him a loan. The old man was puzzled. Why? Lan Shan chuckled. I'm afraid he can't pay me back. With that, he turned around and left. The old man. On the other side, beside Yi Xian, emissary Zhang said in a deep voice, Young master, Lan Shan is in the hall. Yi Xian smiled and said, I know. Emissary Zhang looked at Yi Xian in confusion. Then young master. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He should have guessed the reason why I went to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, and his unwillingness to see me is very obvious. Since the other party is unwilling, I naturally can't force it. The chapter made silence. Yi Xian smiled and said, Let's go to Luo World. Emissary Zhang nodded. All right. Not long after, the two of them arrived at the teleportation platform. Under emissary Zhang's lead, the two of them arrived in front of a teleportation platform. Just as the two of them were about to enter, a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from behind them. Emissary Zhang frowned. He turned around and waved his sleeve. The terrifying aura was directly shattered. A surprised voice suddenly resounded from behind Yi Xian and emissary Zhang. Yi Xian and emissary Zhang turned around and saw a lady in a purple robe standing before them. The lady had shoulder-length hair and she held a folding fan in her right hand. She had an extraordinary bearing. Behind her was an old man in a black robe. The old man's face was gloomy, and there was a ghastly look in his eyes. The lady in the purple robe looked at emissary Zhang with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Miss, what's the matter? The violet-robed woman withdrew her gaze when she heard this, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. She sized him up before she smiled and said, It's nothing. We're heading to the Luo realm as well. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, Both of you intend to head to Luo world as well? Then why are you stopping us? The lady gazed at Yi Xian and remained silent. Meanwhile, emissary Zhang spoke calmly. Once someone enters the teleportation formation to Luo world, then it'll take half a day before they can enter again. If we enter it, then they'll have to wait for half a day. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Just a single teleportation formation to Luo world? Emissary Zhang nodded. Yes. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he gazed at the lady and smiled. Miss, how about we accompany each other and enter it together? Who do you think you are? Meanwhile, the old man behind the lady spoke abruptly. Are you even worthy of going with my young miss? You. Emissary Zhang suddenly raised his hand and slapped it down. Thump. The old man didn't even have the time to react before he was forced to his knees by a terrifying force. Space shattered as he knelt down. Emissary Zhang gazed at the dumbfounded old man. Who do you think you are? Are you even worthy of speaking to my young master? The black-robed old man's face was filled with disbelief. You're a half-step god. A half-step god. Hearing this, the purple-robed woman's pupils suddenly constricted. A half-step god could be considered as a top figure even in the entire Luo world. Emissary Zhang's face remained expressionless. He didn't speak and he just moved behind Yi Xian. He had to obey his young master's orders. As a subordinate, he couldn't steal the limelight from his young master. Yi Xian glanced at the lady and the black-robed old man and then he said, "Brother Zhang, let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the teleportation formation. Meanwhile, the violet-robed woman spoke abruptly, "Who are you?" Yi Xian stopped moving and then he turned around to look at her. "What's wrong?" She gazed at Yi Xian. "I'm from the Luo world's Zhantai clan." Yi Xian shook his head. "I've never heard of it." The violet-robed woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've never heard of it?" Yi Xian turned around to look at Emissary Zhang. "Have you?" Emissary Zhang shook his head. "I've never heard of it." The violet-robed woman's face instantly darkened. "How dare you look down on my Zhantai clan?" Yi Xian sighed softly. "I'm not looking down on your Zhantai clan. I really haven't heard of your Zhantai clan. Besides that, I think it's really not worth it to get into a conflict over something so trivial. What do you think?" The violet-robed woman gazed at Yi Xian. "You started it." Yi Xian smiled. "Then was it your subordinate who provoked me first?" The violet-robed woman fell silent. Yi Xian continued. "I know that your Zhantai clan is definitely a powerful clan, but I think that we should keep a low profile and be humble when we're outside." The violet-robed woman gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian continued. "Tell me, is it worth it for both of us to get into a conflict over something so trivial? I don't think it's worth it, so let's stop here. Is that all right?" The violet-robed woman still didn't speak. Yi Xian didn't say anything else and he turned around and led Emissary Zhang into the teleportation formation. The violet-robed woman gazed at Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang who had vanished into the distance with a calm expression, and no one knew what she was thinking. Behind her, the old man's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. The violet-robed woman suddenly spoke softly, "Did Dayabi?" As she spoke, her eyes narrowed slightly and her gaze flickered. No one knew what she was thinking. In the space-time tunnel, Emissary Zhang glanced at Yi Xian and then he smiled. "Young master, you're too kind." Hey. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "It's not that I'm kind, but I don't want to kill anymore. Under normal circumstances we will have a conflict with them and then kill them. Then the people behind them will come and take revenge on us." As he spoke, he shook his head again. "This is so boring." Emissary Zhang was silent. Yi Xian continued. "Fewer enemies, more friends. After all, my academy wants to change the entire universe and I don't want to change the entire universe by killing." Emissary Zhang glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. And suddenly, a faint sword intent appeared around him. Kindness sword intent. And now, the kindness sword intent on his body completely suppressed the evil sword intent. In addition, his human world sword intent was also getting stronger, and the human world sword intent was all-encompassing. Yi Xian looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand. He now had the Qingxian sword and the area armor. In fact, he really wanted to fight with Emissary Zhang, and he wanted to see how far he was from the superior god realm. There was definitely a gap. It was impossible for him to cross 2 levels and reach the divine realm. He might have a chance after reaching the divine transformation realm, but it was definitely impossible now. And to reach the divine transformation realm he needed money. Money. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. He was in dire need of money now. At this moment, Emissary Zhang suddenly said, "Young master, we have arrived." Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked into the distance. Not far away, a white light suddenly gushed out, and the next moment, the two of them directly disappeared in the teleportation formation. Not long after, Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang appeared on a plain. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and he looked around. There were all kinds of teleportation formations everywhere, and from time to time, people walked out of these teleportation formations. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. This industry was too profitable. To start such an industry, one only needed to sit around and collect money every day. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang. The middle-aged man bowed slightly. "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. "Celestial Treasure Pavilion?" The middle-aged man nodded. "Young Master Yi, I am the president of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion branch in Luo World, Lan Qing." Yi Xian sized up the middle-aged man and smiled. What is your relationship with that Lan Shan? Lan Qing smiled. He is my brother. Brother. Yi Xian was slightly stunned and then he smiled. Did you come to me for something? Lan Qing smiled slightly. As far as I know, young Master Yi wants a loan? Yi Xian nodded. Lan Qing said in a low voice. Young Master Yi, how much do you want? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, 2 billion universe veins. Lan Qing was silent for a moment and then he said, I will give young Master Yi a loan of 3 billion. 3 billion. Yi Xian was stunned. Lan Qing continued, there is no need for any guarantee and there is no need for any interest. However, young Master Yi has to pay it back within 10 years. Yi Xian looked at Lan Qing. Why? Lan Qing smiled slightly. Young Master Yi is an extraordinary genius and the pavilion master thinks highly of you. Therefore I am willing to be friends with young Master Yi. As he spoke, he opened his palm and a storage ring appeared in front of Yi Xian. There were exactly 3 billion universe veins in the storage ring. Yi Xian looked at Lan Qing for a moment and then he smiled. Aren't you afraid that I won't return it? Lan Qing blinked. If young Master Yi doesn't return it, then I will go to Guanshan Academy and not leave. 7017K. Chapter 2383. 3 billion. Yi Xian fell silent as he gazed at the spatial ring in his hand. 3 billion wasn't a small amount, yet Lan Qing had lent it to him just like that. Moreover, he didn't even take any interest. Obviously, Lan Qing wasn't doing this for Yi Xian, but for Qin Guan or the Yang clan. Meanwhile, Lan Qing suddenly smiled. Young Master Yi, I still have matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave. Young Master Yi, feel free to come to the Immortal Treasure Pavilion if you need anything. I, Lan Qing, will definitely not refuse if it's within my ability. Yi Xian smiled. All right. Lan Qing cupped his fists, glanced at Emissary Zhang and then left. Emissary Zhang chuckled as he watched Lan Qing leave. No wonder he was able to become the president of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion's branch in Luo Dimension. He isn't just a little bit stronger than Lan Shan. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. 3 billion is a huge favor. Emissary Zhang smiled. Not to mention 3 billion, even 30 billion is worth it. Yi Xian laughed. He glanced into the distance and said, Where are we going now? Emissary Zhang replied, Luo City. According to my knowledge, the lord of this world is called Luo Tian. Yi Xian blinked. Do they recognize me as their young master? Emissary Zhang was stunned and then he smiled. Young master, don't joke around. How could they dare to not recognize you? As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment and continued, Young master, don't lower yourself. Regardless of whether it's me or Luo Tian, we're just working for the Yang clan. If it wasn't for the Yang clan, then it would be impossible for us to attain the god rank realm. Yi Xian fell silent. Emissary Zhang continued, Young master can change the owner of the entire Luo dimension with a single word. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Power. Needless to say, the temptation of power was extremely great on many occasions. The young master of the Yang clan? He didn't have such a concept in the past because he hadn't come into contact with the Yang clan. But now, Emissary Zhang's words allowed him to understand how terrifying his identity as the young master of the Yang clan was. A single sentence was enough to change the life and death of countless people. At this time, Envoy Zhang added, Also, young master may not know this, but this Luo world is actually nothing compared to the entire Yang clan's territory. It's equivalent to a small town in the mortal world. No, it's not even a small town, at most a slightly larger village. Yi Xian was a little curious. Who is in charge of the Yang clan now? Emissary Zhang smiled bitterly. I don't know. Yi Xian was surprised. You don't know. Emissary Zhang nodded, his smile becoming more bitter. My rank is not high enough, so I can't get in touch with the higher-ups of the Yang clan. Yi Xian was speechless. Envoy Zhang continued. However, I know that the Yang clan has a mysterious troop. Yi Xian looked at Emissary Zhang. The mysterious troop? Emissary Zhang nodded. This mysterious unit seems to be made up entirely of swordsmen. There aren't many of them, but their strength is extremely terrifying. And they all listen to the orders of one person, that is Sword Emperor Tingyun. Yi Xian was stunned. Tingyun. Emissary Zhang nodded. Yes. Yi Xian smiled faintly. So it's her. A long time ago he had seen Tingyun. Back then there was also Tu. Yi Xian sighed softly. He missed Tu a little. Ever since Tu left back then there was no news of him. Thinking of this, Yi Xian secretly decided to get the Yang clan to help look for Tuesday. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and said, "Let's go to Luocheng." Emissary Zhang nodded. Both of them disappeared on the spot. Not long after both of them disappeared, a woman and an old man appeared on the scene. This woman was the purple-robed woman that both of them had met previously. The old man stared into the distance with a gloomy gaze. No one knew what he was thinking. The purple-robed woman suddenly said, "Let's go." With that, she and the old man disappeared on the spot. Luocheng. When Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang arrived at Luocheng, Yi Xian was shocked by the entire city. The size of the entire city was slightly beyond his expectations. The city walls stretched as far as the eye could see, and the city walls were 300 m tall. A person standing in front of the city was really tiny, like an ant. Of course, it was different from the mortal world. No matter how tall the city walls were, they were still short in front of these cultivators who could go to heaven and earth. Not to mention the city walls, even the entire world was extremely tiny in front of these powerful cultivators. Emissary Zhang suddenly laughed. This Luocheng is so much bigger than the upper god realm. Yi Xian looked at Emissary Zhang and smiled. Under normal circumstances, how do you get promoted? Emissary Zhang thought about it and said, there are two ways. First, one has to be strong enough. For example, if I'm above the high god realm, I'll be able to get promoted and head to a bigger universe to work there. There I'll get more rights and cultivation resources. The second way is to render meritorious service. If I render meritorious service, I can get promoted too. As he spoke, he shook his head. Both are difficult. To be honest, if there are no accidents, the upper god realm and the upper god realm are my limits. Yi Xian chuckled. Meeting me, the upper god realm will be your starting point. As he finished speaking, he walked into the distance. Emissary Zhang was stunned for a moment. Then he was overjoyed and quickly followed. At this moment he was so excited that his body could not help but tremble. Just as he said, if there were no special opportunities, the upper god realm and the upper god realm were his limits. However, Yi Xian was his special opportunity. This was the young master of the Yang clan. Emissary Zhang followed Yi Xian and was a little like a close official of the emperor in the mortal world. On the surface he was just a guard, but who would dare to look down on him? After entering the city, Yi Xian looked at both sides. In the city there were people coming and going. It was very prosperous. Emissary Zhang suddenly said, "Young master, let's head to the city lord residence." Yi Xian nodded. All right. The two of them were about to head to the city lord residence when a voice suddenly came from the side. "Brother, please wait." Hearing this, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. He turned around and saw a young man standing in front of him. The man looked to be in his 20s and wore a luxurious robe with a long jade hanging on his waist. He looked very elegant and refined. Yi Xian smiled. "What's the matter?" The young man walked slowly to Yi Xian and smiled. "I am Li Feng. May I know your name?" Yi Xian said, "Yi Xian." Li Feng smiled. He pointed at the dedayabi hanging on Yi Xian's waist. "Brother Yi, to tell you the truth, I called you here because of this." At this moment Xiaota suddenly said, "Stupid pen, you're not cool at all. Everyone knows you. What are you doing here?" Dedayabi was speechless. Yi Xian glanced at the dedayabi hanging on his waist and then he smiled. "For this." Li Feng nodded. "Brother Yi, to tell you the truth, a friend of mine wants to buy this. Can you name a price?" "By dedayabi?" Yi Xian was stunned. Dedayabi was speechless. Li Feng smiled. "Yes. Brother Yi, name a price." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I'm not selling." Li Feng smiled. "Brother Yi will give you a very satisfactory price." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Then 10 billion. The smile on Li Feng's face gradually vanished. Yi Xian smiled. "Is that too much?" Li Feng smiled and said, "Brother Yi, you're a little too greedy." Yi Xian said seriously, "Brother Li, this is dedayabi, dedayabi." Li Feng chuckled. "Dedayabi? It's just a clone. Moreover, even if it's not a clone but the main body, then it isn't worth 10 billion. Yi Xian was speechless. In a room somewhere in the Milky Way, a voice suddenly resounded. "Fuck." Within Luoqing, Yi Xian looked at Li Feng and smiled. Young Master Li, who's your friend? Li Feng shook his head. Brother Yi doesn't need to know. As he spoke, he walked over to Yi Xian and opened his palm. A spatial ring appeared before Yi Xian. Brother Yi, I want this today. Yi Xian glanced at the spatial ring. There were only 10 million universe veins within it. 10 million. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment Xiao suddenly said, 10 million. Lousy pen, you're too cheap. If I were you, I'd buy a piece of tofu and kill myself. This is too shameful. Dedeabi said angrily, Lousy Ta, can you stop talking nonsense? Xiao said calmly, what are you shouting at me for? Shout at him. Dedeabi suddenly said calmly, why would I shout at someone who's about to die? Xiao said solemnly, you've made arrangements for him? Dedeabi said, it's none of your business. Xiao, in the city, Yi Xian looked at the 10 million universe veins in front of him and shook his head with a smile. Brother Li, are you going to forcefully buy it? Li Feng looked at Yi Xian and pinched the spatial ring. There were only 9 million universe veins in it. Are you selling it? Yi Xian shook his head. Li Feng smiled and pinched the spatial ring again. There were only 5 million universe veins left. Are you selling it? Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Envoy Zhang looked at Li Feng with a calm expression. It was like he was looking at a dead man. Li Feng suddenly put the spatial ring away and smiled. Brother Yi, there's not a single one left now. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Brother Li, look at me. Do you think I'm a person who's easy to bully? Li Feng roared with laughter. What? Brother Yi, are you trying to threaten me? Yi Xian shook his head. I just want you to take a look at me and see if I'm easy to bully. Li Feng sized up Yi Xian seriously and then he smiled. I think you're very easy to bully. Yi Xian looked at Li Feng. How can you tell? Li Feng smiled. Soft and weak, gentle in speech and has such a good temper. People like this are usually easy to bully. Am I right? Yi Xian glanced at Li Feng and smiled. What's the use of your eyes? At this moment Envoy Zhang pressed his fingers together. Blood suddenly sprayed from Li Feng's eyes. Ah! Li Feng was horrified. He retreated repeatedly and said angrily, You dare to injure me. You dare to injure me. Yi Xian shook his head. You're being used as a tool. What's the use of your brain? Envoy Zhang pressed his fingers together. Li Feng's head flew into the air. Blood sprayed into the sky like a fountain. Murder. Countless people in the surroundings were horrified and retreated explosively. After all, it was forbidden to kill people in the city. In a certain restaurant, a man in white suddenly picked up the wine cup in front of him and took a sip. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. I thought you were a smart person, but I didn't expect you to be a retard. Killing people in the Yang clan's territory. This young master is going to die of laughter. P.S. The last time I updated 2 chapters I was scolded badly. I underestimated my place in your hearts. Don't explode. Tickets? I'm probably daydreaming. F***CK. 7017K. Chapter 2384. There was a woman in front of the white-clothed man. It was the violet-robed woman. The violet-robed woman picked up her teacup and took a sip and then she smiled. Brother Bai Xing, don't underestimate him. Especially that person by his side, he's at least an expert at the 5th level of the soul transformation realm. The man called Bai Xing glanced at Emissary Zhang and then he smiled. He really is extraordinary. As he spoke, he gazed at the violet-robed woman. Zhan Ting, do you have enmity with him? The violet-robed woman called Zhan Taijing grinned. Sort of. Bai Xing was about to speak, but he suddenly frowned and turned around. A young man was walking up slowly from the nearby staircase, and there was a middle-aged man by the young man's side. It was Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang. Bai Xing frowned slightly when he saw Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang walk over. Meanwhile, an old man with a walking stick suddenly appeared by Bai Xing's side, and his gaze locked onto Emissary Zhang while his eyes were filled with vigilance. Yi Xian walked slowly towards Bai Xing. Meanwhile, the old man by Bai Xing's side immediately stood in front of Yi Xian, and then Emissary Zhang suddenly pressed his right hand down from afar. Bang! Under everyone's gaze, the old man with the crutch directly knelt in front of Yi Xian with a plop. He did not even have the strength to resist at all. Bai Sheng's pupils constricted when he witnessed this scene. Because the old man was an expert at the peak of the 4th level of the soul transformation realm, yet he wasn't even able to resist this middle-aged man. The violet-robed woman's expression instantly became solemn as well. I've underestimated him. This emissary Zhang might be an expert at the 6th level of the soul transformation realm or above. Xian walked over slowly to sit by Bai Sheng's side and then he smiled. I was quite curious. After all, it's my first time in Luoqing and I have no enemies at all. So why would anyone target me? As he spoke, he gazed at the violet-robed woman and smiled. I understand now that I've seen you. Zhang Taijing gazed at Xian in silence. Xian looked at Zhang Taijing and said with a smile, I really don't understand. We met because of a very, very small matter. Why would Miss want to form an evil fate because of a very, very small matter? The old man by Zhang Taijing's side was just about to speak when emissary Zhang suddenly clenched his right hand. Boom. The black-robed old man's body shattered right away and his soul was grabbed by the throat by an invisible hand, rendering him unable to make a single sound. Emissary Zhang looked coldly at the black-robed old man. Young master didn't ask you, so you shut up, understand? The black-robed old man looked at Messenger Zhang in horror, his eyes filled with disbelief. He had wanted to retaliate, or rather he had been mentally prepared. However, when emissary Zhang had made his move, he hadn't been able to retaliate at all. Zhang Taijing's expression instantly became unsightly when she saw the black-robed old man's body being destroyed. She gazed at Xian and was just about to speak when Xian shook his head and smiled. Miss, I didn't want to cause trouble because it's better to avoid trouble. But unfortunately, that's only my wishful thinking. Since you want to cause trouble for me so much, then I'll do as you wish. As soon as he finished speaking, a strand of light from a sword pierced through her forehead before she could even react, and then her entire body was nailed to a pillar. Zhang Taijing roared furiously. I'm from the Zhantai clan. Xian gazed at Zhang Taijing and smiled. Do you know why I didn't kill you? It's because I wanted you to call for help. Come call for help. Let the most capable member of your Zhantai clan come out. Zhang Taijing was shocked when she heard this. Why is he so confident? Why? At this moment, Zhang Taijing suddenly felt slightly panicked. On the other hand, Bai Sheng's expression had become extremely solemn, and he gazed at Xian. Your Excellency. Emissary Zhang suddenly slapped him. Boom. Before everyone's eyes, Bai Sheng's physical body directly shattered and turned into ashes, while the surrounding restaurant remained completely unscathed. Bai Sheng was dumbfounded. Emissary Zhang glanced coldly at Bai Sheng's soul. Did the young master allow you to speak? Bai Sheng. Xian looked at Zhang Taijing, who had been nailed to the pillar by him. Where are your people? Zhang Taijing stared fixedly at Xian and did not speak. Xian smiled. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly came from the side. The next moment, an old man holding a spear appeared in the restaurant. The old man looked at Xian. Old man Zhang Tai. Before he could finish speaking, emissary Zhang suddenly punched out. Boom. The old man disappeared on the spot. He had been forcefully erased. Seeing this, Zhang Taijing's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of needles. Bai Sheng's face was also filled with terror. Just how strong was this emissary Zhang? Is he really only at the half-step soul formation stage? Suddenly, a middle-aged man appeared here. He glanced at Bai Sheng and then he gazed at emissary Zhang. Who are you? Emissary Zhang's face remained expressionless. Speak to my young master. The middle-aged man's gaze descended onto Xian, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, I'm the Grand Elder of the Bai clan, Bai Zhan. May I know your name? Xian smiled. Xian. The middle-aged man's brows knit together slightly because he hadn't heard of this name. He restrained his thoughts and spoke in a low voice. May I know how my Bai clan has offended you? Xian pointed at Bai Sheng in the distance and said with a smile, Ask him. As he spoke, he gazed at emissary Zhang. If he dares to lie, then send him from the afterlife. Emissary Zhang bowed slightly. Understood. Bai Sheng was speechless. Bai Zhan glanced at emissary Zhang and then he gazed at Bai Sheng. Speak. Bai Sheng didn't dare conceal anything and he told them everything. After he heard Bai Sheng, Bai Zhan glanced coldly at Zhang Taijing. He knew that Bai Sheng had fallen into her trap. Bless. Baijan shook his head and sighed. What a piece of trash. Baijan restrained his thoughts and then he gazed at Yi Xian and cupped his fists. Young master, it's my Bai clan's fault. Please be merciful. Yi Xian smiled. You don't seem to be sincere at all. Baijan was slightly stunned and then he said, what sort of sincerity do you need? Yi Xian glanced at Bai Xing and then he smiled. He's such a good-for-nothing, so he probably doesn't have any status in your clan, right? Baijan hurriedly nodded and he was about to speak when Bai Xing spoke fiercely. My father is the patriarch of the Bai clan, and I'm the young master of the Bai clan. Baijan was infuriated when he heard Bai Xing, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What an idiot. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he heard Bai Xing. Since you're the young master, then your life is valuable. 1 billion. As he spoke he grinned. 1 billion to buy your young master's life isn't too much, right? Baijan's expression gradually calmed down as he gazed at Yi Xian. 1 billion? Yi Xian nodded. Is that a lot? Baijan fell silent for a short moment and then he said, that's quite an exorbitant demand. Yi Xian smiled. You can refuse. Baijan's eyes narrowed slightly. Don't go overboard and it'll be easier for us to meet in the future. You. Emissary Zhang suddenly smashed his fist forward. Baijan's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he swiftly placed his arms before his chest. In the next moment Baijan vanished on the spot. He'd been completely annihilated. There wasn't even the slightest movement. The expressions of everyone in the restaurant changed when they witnessed this scene. That was too terrifying. Being killed in an instant wasn't terrifying. The terrifying part was that it had been killed with such ease, and there really wasn't even the slightest movement. That was simply absurd. At this moment Bai Xing and the others were terrified. They were truly terrified. They knew that they'd provoked someone that they shouldn't have provoked. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Taijing and Zhang Taijing looked at Yi Xian in horror. Who are you? Who the hell are you? Yi Xian smiled. Miss, you can call for help. Zhang Taijing's expression was somewhat ugly. Call for help? At this moment she was completely panicking. At this moment footsteps suddenly sounded from the side and soon a middle-aged man walked up. Seeing the middle-aged man, Zhang Taijing was instantly ecstatic. Father! The person who came was the patriarch of Zhantai clan, Zhang Taiyan. After Zhang Taiyan walked up, he directly ignored Zhang Taijing and then walked to the front of Yi Xian and his eyes fell on Yi Xian. Before coming, I've investigated the entire Luo world, and there isn't a powerful Yi clan. I think this young master is from the outside. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Zhang Taiyan smiled. Young master, this is a small matter. Can young master be magnanimous? Yi Xian pointed at Zhang Taijing. I gave her a chance but unfortunately she didn't cherish it. After coming here she caused trouble for me again. Do you think it's appropriate for her to do this? Zhang Taiyan shook his head. No. Yi Xian smiled. 1 billion, give me 1 billion and I'll let her go. Zhang Taiyan shook his head. Young master, do it. Yi Xian was stunned. Zhang Taiyan smiled. Young master, she's not worth 1 billion. Hearing this, Zhang Taijing's face instantly turned pale. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, she's your daughter. Zhang Taiyan chuckled. My daughter is gone. She can be reborn. But 1 billion will empty the entire Zhantai clan. It's not worth it to harm the entire clan for one person. Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, Zhang Taiyuan suddenly waved his right hand. Boom. Zhang Taijing was directly hit by a force and then she was completely wiped out. Killed. Yi Xian was stunned. He killed her just like that. Father. Fuck. Yi Xian was stunned. It wasn't just Yi Xian, even Emissary Zhang was surprised. He glanced at Zhang Taiyuan who sat in front of Yi Xian and didn't speak. Bai Xing looked at Zhang Taiyuan in disbelief. Of course he felt even more sorrow at this moment because he knew that compared to the clan, an individual was really insignificant. Meanwhile, Zhang Taiyan suddenly stood up and bowed slightly. Young master, the culprit is dead. The enmity between the Zhantai clan and young master is settled. Young master, take care. As soon as he finished speaking he turned around and left. On the spot Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then he said softly, my father is actually not bad. The green-clothed man was speechless. Right at this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly attacked from the distant horizon. Meanwhile, Bai Xing suddenly said excitedly, it's an expert from Luocheng. An expert from Luoqing. An expert from Luoqing. Obviously, Luoqing already knew that a battle had occurred here. Bai Xing suddenly looked at Yi Xian and said fiercely, "Do you know the Yang clan? Killing someone in the Yang clan's territory is equivalent to looking down on the Yang clan." Yi Xian picked up the teacup in front of him and took a sip, and then he said softly, "The Yang clan?" As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. "I can annihilate them with a flick of my finger." Bai Xing was speechless. Emissary Zhang was embarrassed. This act. 7017K. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.